drum? How does the kick drum sound and the voice sound? Let me know if it's sounding correct the way it's supposed to. You just put it in the chat. Yeah, and welcome everybody. We're gonna take some time today to talk about getting things set up for travel. So a live setup, let's see here, a live setup for traveling. So obviously there's way too much gear here on the table to be able to travel with, and there's even more that's not here on the table. And yeah, so we're going to talk about how to choose what is important for me, how I choose, some things you can consider if you're thinking about putting together something that you can travel with, whether that's traveling down to your local synth meetup to play a show, or whether that's hopping on a flight and traveling halfway around the world, whichever. The idea of being able to travel with your gear is something that I think we talk some about here, but it doesn't get talked about a lot. Everybody talks about specifically the gear and don't really think about the consequences sometimes of something like a TR-1000, which is gigantic and not necessarily the thing you want to chuck in your backpack and travel with. So welcome everybody. Again, put in the chat if you can how things sound, if the audio sounds okay, and also throw in the chat wherever you're tuning in from. I always like to see that. It's always good to kind of see everybody that we're connected from around the world. It's always surprising to me how far these signals travel from out here in the mountains of Mexico to places all around the world. So go ahead and pop those into the chat if you can. And if you have any questions about anything that we're talking about today, please feel free to throw it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that so that we can, so I can answer your questions if I can. If I know the answer, I'll do my best to answer it. If I don't know the answer, then I'll let you know that too, because there's way more stuff that I don't know than what I do know. So anyway, hey Rolf, what's going on? Good to see you. Glad to hear it sounds good. Ryan, what's going on? Boston, sweet. Yes, Ryan just finished up my my performance course, which I think he had a good time. He said he had a good time. Which, shameless plug if you're, because I don't do sponsors for my videos. I don't do paid sponsorships. Sometimes gear companies will send me gear, but again, that's not a paid sponsorship either. I don't really show anything that I don't use, that I don't like. So since I don't do paid sponsors, the only way to really kind of support the channel is either Patreon or through my courses or affiliate links that are down below. So if you want to check out the performance course, we talk about how to do this, how to put this together, how to build your own setup, how to organize it, and then how to build music live, how to improvise live, how to get gigs, how to market yourself. There's all kinds of different facets to it. So if you're interested in doing that, click the link that's down below, and you can sign up. The next course actually starts tomorrow. The videos are live now. The twice weekly calls begin tomorrow. So if you're interested in doing that, go ahead and pop in there. I would love to have you on. So go to circolive.com/courses and check out the outline of the course. You can see exactly what everything's about. And if you have any questions about it, please put them in the chat, or feel free to reach out to me about those things as well. Let's see what else. There's also Patreon as well. You can see there's a little Patreon link on the bottom. These are all my shameless plugs at the beginning because I don't have sponsors, so I gotta kind of sponsor myself. So that's the way that you can support this if you would like to. Let's see who else we got here. Surveillance State Music, California, sweet. Ryan, performance course was great. Awesome, glad you liked it. Checking in from Detroit, awesome. The original home of techno, or one of the original homes of techno. Denmark, Copenhagen, Denmark. Good to see you there as well. Well, welcome everybody. No matter where you're tuning in from, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. We try to do these things. They're pretty casual. They're not scripted. It's kind of, I'm going to go through some stuff that I was thinking you guys might want to hear about. But if there's things that you would rather hear about, or if you have questions about stuff, please pop it into the chat, and I'm happy to do that. And we'll do a little music. We'll talk a little bit about how we're using this stuff and how it's set up, and why I've kind of like selected the things that I've I've selected for what I'm going to be taking on my upcoming trip. I'll be spending basically the month of August in Europe with shows in Berlin, 3 shows in Berlin as of right now. Looks like a couple shows in Croatia. And then the 29th of August, I'll be playing the Cluster Festival in Delft in the Netherlands, which is going to be a lot of fun. Klangspoor, Paul Ray, Colin Benders, great in a really cool kind of old ancient warehouse type location. So if you're around in that area, I would love to see you out. Obviously, always great to have you at shows. And if you're there, come say hi. Let's see, Toby, what's going on from Spain? New Jersey again. Going from New Jersey again. Western North Carolina, sweet. Love it, but it's kind of a lot. The music you're making, can you manage with the Syntec? Yeah, you can, absolutely, and that's one of the things that we talk about in the course is that it's not gear specific, and it's also not genre specific. So it's really about, obviously I'm going to lean towards techno that I make, but I've had people to do the course that do ambient music, that do hip hop, that do drum and bass, that do industrial, do all sorts of different kinds of music. It is all about electronic music and improvised live performance of electronic music. But none of it is really specific to any genre or any one particular kind of gear. I've had people do it. I had one person do it with an iPad and a Digitakt. I had somebody do it with only a Push 3 and no other hardware. I've had people do it with massive modular setups. People do it with a bunch of Electron boxes. So it's really kind of, it depends on you. And so what you would like to get out of it. So it's really catered towards you. And it's not a this is how you do it course. It's a here's how to do what you're gonna do. Not necessarily here's one way to do it and that's it. So it gives you a lot of information and background in different ways that you can do however you want to do music with whatever gear you want to do it with. So, and as far as kind of a lot, yeah, I understand that. It is an investment, but it does include 8 hours of live in person, like one-on-one via Zoom, or not one-on-one, like group via Zoom, but in real time. Courses plus about 50 videos, a little over 50 videos that are unique to the course. They're not like YouTube videos or anything. They're the videos that are specifically done for the course. There's weekly feedback on your music. It includes a 1 hour one-on-one with me via Zoom, and we can go over anything that you like to do. So there's a lot that in it. Yes, it is a lot, but it's a real commitment. And so rather than buying that random piece of gear that might make you better, or you think might make you better, why not do this and it'll make all your gear better? That's kind of the way I look at it. So anyway, let's see here. Any ideas when the Exelon will ship? Yes, Exelon, as far as I know, is still shipping in August. That's been the thing since the beginning. And I had actually a call with Adam yesterday. I don't see that changing, and if it did, it would only be like a week here or there. I don't think it's gonna, I still think that he's shooting for August. They have had some issues finding the quantity of parts they need, but I think they've got that all sorted out. So looks like it's good. Let's see here. Amazing to hear about shows in the EU. Yes, I'm very excited for that as well. When am I in Delft? I'm in Delft the 29th of August. Already have a question. I'm wondering how you connect the Exelon SL to the modular, as the Exelon SL is big jacks. Yes, let me reach back here and grab this. This is your solution to big jacks. 3.5 millimeter to 1/4 inch cables. I have a whole bunch of those. So basically what you see plugged into the back of the mixer here. So if I go, let's see to this view so you can see what you see plugged into the back of the mixer here. A lot of these are coming 3.5 millimeter out of the modular into the mixer, Or then there's other 1/4 inch cables that are going out to like the Tonewerk, the TR1000 and stuff like that. But yeah, it needs to be 1/4 inch on this side. And but the cables are, you know, these ones that are here that you see, these are all 3.5 millimeter out to 1/4 inch in on this side. So yes, that's how I do it. In the UK. Awesome. Welcome from the UK. Hope to get to the UK sometime soon. That's a goal of mine here. Let's see. Looking at the BoardBrain site now, it's showing the first production run of 300 units is estimated to ship 1 September through 15th. I don't know if that's for folks that pre-ordered early. I think that's the first run and not the pre-orders, but I could be wrong. I would definitely check that out. But yes, I think the plan is still August, but you know, that, I guess that could change. But yeah, we keep an eye on their website. One thing I know that they were talking about is that they want to make sure that everything was perfect on it, rather than trying to make sure that they, you know, rushed to get something out. So one of the things that's interesting about the Exelon, or like unique, I guess not unique, but it's special about the Exelon, is that since it's an all analog device, once it's out, it's out. It's not like a lot of companies that it seems like the trend recently has been put out something that's mostly finished and then update firmware as time goes on. And I think people get really frustrated with that. So companies have been kind of rushing things out and then trying to make the firmware catch up to the device over time. And I think when you have an analog device, you obviously can't update firmware because there is no firmware. So it has to be what it is once it goes out. So the final version that comes out, it needs to be complete all the way till the end. And making sure that everything is dialed in and done perfectly, I know is something that that Adam at BoardBrain is very intent on. So you will see that. But I think it's still August, but definitely keep an eye on their website for any changes to that. Let's see here. Any other questions? I guess not. So if you have other questions, again, please feel free to pop them into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer those as we go along. In the meantime, talk about, you know, I want to talk about what is here as far as the setup, and what's not here, I think is important. There's a whole, there's 2 other modular cases this size, which are off camera. They're not part of this because they aren't things that are going to be coming on this upcoming tour. And so being able to make decisions now is really important, because again, this tour that I have coming up, I'll be gone for a month, and I have multiple gigs in multiple settings, different lengths of sets, different types of sets that I'll be playing. So to be able to have everything that I need in order to be able to do all of that stuff is really important, because I won't be able to kind of go back to the studio and grab a thing in between gigs. And so really kind of making those decisions now is important. So everything that I'm going to be bringing, which I'll talk about what I'm bringing and what I'm not bringing, but everything that I'm going to be bringing is really focused on functionality, flexibility, and versatility, and having the sound that I'm really looking for, as well as trying to kind of simplify control and cabling. I know it doesn't look like that, and that's one of the problems, is there is a lot of complicated cabling and control that goes into all of this. So coming up with a way to simplify that as much as possible is really important. So that's what I'll be doing. So one of the big things was how much modular. So I'm going to be bringing this 7U84 modular case, and that's it. And kind of deciding what goes into that, I'll let you know in a minute, kind of what goes into that whole process. And then I'll be bringing the Exelon SL is my main performance mixer. I'll be bringing the Oxy One sequencer, which is my main control piece. And those are kind of the core of things. So modular, mixer, and the Oxy One. Those I always bring. Everything else is kind of interchangeable, and deciding what I want to bring based on what I'm going to play and how I'm going to play enters into that. So if I'm going to play really long sets, for example, I want to have more options and flexibility as far as voices. So I would want to bring, something like the Tonberg, which has, kind of an infinite amount of sounds that you can get out of it. So having something like that is really great and really super flexible. If I'm going to be playing on really big, really good sound systems, and I want to, really focus in on my drums and percussion and the quality of the mix, I would definitely, make the effort to bring the TR-1000, because not only is it fun to play, but for me, the biggest advantage of the TR-1000 is the quality of sound that it puts out, and the way that it kind of makes its own space in a mix on a really good sound system. So, for example, when I played the last Prediction Cycle show in Berlin, and we had 5 artists playing all at the same time, there's a lot of times when that mix would get really busy because there's a lot of things happening all at once, and kind of all the frequencies are taken up, and there's not really room to make space in a mix for something. But I could bring in any sound on the TR-1000 into that mix, and you would hear it crystal clear through the mix, just because of the quality of the output sound of this, without having to make it really loud. And so again, it really comes down to, if I could use it all the time, I would use it all the time. Sometimes it's just not practical to be able to travel with it. So if I don't travel with it, then what do I do for drums and percussion? And so there's a lot of different options. I could bring a smaller drum machine. I could use just modular drums, which I do use already, kick and hi-hat I use in the modular already. But I could do, I could put, it back in some of my other voices that I have. So like I could put the Percon's voice in and have a bunch of other percussion stuff or whatever. But the other options that I can go with is using samples, which is kind of the easiest and the most kind of like space conserving way to get the sounds that you want. So, I've considered everything from using like a Roland Boutique 909 to have my 909 drum sounds rather than having samples. But then, I always kind of come back to samples as the flexible, easy way to do it. And then even within having samples, there's flexibility. I could use the Tonberg, and I could use, a sub-track and have multiple one-shot drum samples, which is how I've set up the Tonberg at some times. And you've seen that in some of the other streams probably. Lately, I've been using, switch views here. Lately, I've started using the 1010 Bento, which I have over here on the side, because that gives you a ton of flexibility for using one-shots and loop samples. And so I can set up one track to be 16 one-shot samples, which basically is what I've done here on one of these tracks. I have eight basically 909 samples, a couple that are not 909s, but kind of 909 style samples. I've got those all being sequenced from one multi-track on the Oxy on track 8. So each lane is basically like this row on the TR-1000. And so instead of switching from voice to voice and then using the same buttons for sequencing, I just have 8 times 16 buttons that I can use for sequencing here, and each one of those is sequencing a different one shot in the Bento. That's all on one track. And then I have set up, go back over here, then I've set up the Noisite drop here so that these 8 faders are my 8 voices, or my 8 one-shot tracks in the Bento. And so I've got sequencing from the Oxy, I've got control from the drop, so I can control volume, I can control pitch, delay send, reverb send, and high pass, low pass filtering from these knobs here per track. And those are all controlling the tracks in the Bento. And then inside the Bento, I have control over, all of those different things as well. So pitch and level control and effect sends for delay and reverb and stuff like that. So it gives you a lot of control over it. It's still not as much control as having a drum synth. So using the TR-1000, having, for example, analog or ACB digital synth engines for these, or FM, or all the different types of synth engines that you have in here, you have a lot more individual control over the shape and tone of the sound, where when you use samples, you're stuck to the sample that you chose. And so if you can't really modify that sample in a meaningful way, you need to change samples to do different things. So I can use kind of the bread and butter sounds, 909s, 808s, things that I would normally use. That's what I have set up in here. So I don't have to worry too much about that. But again, there is a trade-off by saving space and weight of carrying the TR-1000. You lose flexibility, sound shaping, control that you would have if you were using synth engines, which is what I use in the TR-1000. So again, there's always going to be trade-offs. And it's one thing that I love to talk about on these streams, because I get asked this a lot. And that is, people will say, is this better than this? Or what's the best one of these? Or what, does this replace this? Is kind of the way questions get framed a lot. And in reality, there is no best. It's all situation dependent. It all depends on you and what type of workflow you like. It depends on the type of music you're making, how you're traveling, all that kind of stuff is really what drives what's best for you in your particular situation. So for me, the Bento does a lot of what the TR-1000 does. It doesn't do everything. It's not a replacement. It's not even in the same league as far as this. It doesn't do even the same things. But in the context of a live set where I'm using a lot of 909 sounds, I can use 909 sample sounds rather than using those ones from here. Now, I don't have any of the other capabilities that I have from this. So trade-off. This one's very small. It can go in my backpack, or it's battery powered. I can use it on the plane and mess around with it, and then go to the show and use it at the show. I can't do that with the TR-1000. I need a whole extra suitcase to put this in, and a way to transport it, and all of that stuff. So again, always trade-offs. And that's just for drums, but I will say there's a lot of other things that you do trade-offs to too, like something like the Swarm synth here. Amazing sounding synth. It has its own built-in sequencer. You can get some really, really super cool, amazing sounds out of it. I don't tend to take this a lot when I go for shows, because it's a whole nother box, a whole nother machine that is a single mono voice. And yeah, it's a really, really good single mono voice, but I can have a single mono voice in my modular that's this big. And so again, there's trade-offs. It may not sound as good as this. It may be different. And so you always have to kind of make up your own mind about what's important for you in your performance that you're going to do. And then going back to the mixer, to the Excelon SL, one of the things that is interesting about this is that in the shape that it is and the size that it is, it actually replaced for me in my live performances a lot of other stuff that was much bigger. And it does a lot of things that other things can't do or couldn't do at all in my setup. So for example, with this setup, I have per channel, I have an analog overdrive, I have an EQ per channel, I have my effects sends, I have a compressor per channel, analog as well, that has a couple different settings. I have a built-in master sidechain that's assignable by channel. And so to do all of those things with modular or hardware boxes or pedals or whatever would be, difficult, if not impossible, and extremely expensive to try to do that. I mean, just coming up with 8 compressors, like 8 good quality analog compressors that you could put on 8 different tracks, that's already a lot of money. But then you start to talk about EQ, analog overdrive, all of that stuff. And it just wasn't possible to do a lot of this stuff, even with a large modular case, which I had before. I was using double this size, and to still have mixing And some of these capabilities took a whole nother one of these and probably 3 times as much money as what the mixer costs. And the mixer does still at that point much more. You know, it has an assignable filter, for example, an analog stereo high pass, low pass filter that can be assigned to any channel or multiple channels or your master mix. To have an individual stereo high pass, low pass analog filter for every single channel would be really expensive. So getting the flexibility of that in one thing is really is kind of, you know, one of the driving things behind this. So all of that combined with the fact that it scaled all of that down to something that's way smaller than just the extra modular boat that I had, with way more capability. Those are kind of the trade-offs that I look for when I'm looking at something to travel with. And again, there are trade-offs. With one big modular case, everything's already pre-patched. So when you show up, you open your case, you plug it in, you connect your stereo outs, and you're ready to play. With this, when I go to a performance, I need 10 minutes to set up, to cable things, to cable all of my audio ins and outs and my effect sends and all of that kind of stuff. So there's definitely some drawbacks to this. You lose some convenience, but you definitely gain capabilities, right? So it's like there's always going to be trade-offs, and those trade-offs sometimes can be performance, sometimes they can be capabilities, sometimes the trade-offs are, you know, size and weight, sometimes they're cost or expense. So it's like it all kind of comes down to your preferences. Now, all of that said, one of the things that I get asked, and it was even asked earlier on in the chat, can you do this on a Syntakt? Yeah, you absolutely can do this all on one box. You don't need other boxes. Now, again, it comes down to a couple of questions. Why are you doing this? Why are you performing? Why are you doing, why are you, you know, getting out and doing a live performance? Is it to present music? Because if it's to present music, you know, as somebody who DJ'd and produced for years and years and years, it's way easier to produce tracks and then take a USB stick and DJ than it is to perform live. So if it's about presenting the music, there's way easier and less expensive ways to do that, 100%. But if it's about the actual performance side of it, then it comes down to, what do you have fun performing on? What do you enjoy playing, touching, manipulating, you know, being creative on? What do you enjoy? And then there's also the part of it, which is, what does the audience enjoy seeing you perform on? Because they're there to listen to music and see a live performance. Because again, if it was just about the music, you could just DJ and they would be fine. Or you could just put on a playlist of your music and they would be fine, or a pre-recording. But it's not about that. It's about interaction with the crowd and you know, the show aspect of it, what they're seeing as far as the performance that you're putting on. So in that case, if you have one box, a Syntakt, a Digitakt, MPC, doesn't matter. Pick your one box. If you have one box and your show is you performing on one box, so you're leaning over one thing and you're doing this and you're changing menus and then you're going, you know, over your thing, but that's all you're doing is what the audience sees is just you touching the same, you know, 6 or 8 knobs over and over and over again, and music is coming out, but there's no connection between you're doing a thing and the music's coming out, or you're doing a thing and the music's changing. So there's no you know, interactive show aspect of saying I'm doing this and the music is reacting to that, right? So again, it comes back to, what would you like to perform? Would, you know, it's, if you watch Colin Menders play live with his big modular setup, it's like a mad scientist going around and doing stuff and twisting and manipulating, and it's crazy, and it's something to see, something to watch. Where if you see, there's other big live artists that play just like on 1 or 2 things. Like I've seen recently, there's this trend of playing, like, I'll use air quotes, playing live, where they'll use like 2 Octatracks. and a DJ mixer, or they'll use two machinas or two MPCs and a DJ mixer. And it's like, okay, that's another way to do it, but there's not as much interaction. So they've made a conscious decision that the interaction between the person, the music, the crowd is less of an important part of what they want to present as a show, and that the music itself is more important than the performance itself. And so again, there's no right or wrong answer, but it all comes down to what you want to do. So going back to, can you do this on one box? 100%. Do you need all of this stuff? Absolutely not. You do not need any of this stuff. You need a thing. And that thing, if it's really super capable, it's capable of making the music. But if you want to interact with, touch, change, move, manipulate your music in a live show, then you need things that have a different type of interface, maybe more things that are spread out across multiple devices or across a modular rack or whatever, in order to be able to have that show part of the show. Okay, but again, you don't have to have that. Maybe that's not important to you. You know, there's I'm old enough to remember back in the old days when there was, a DJ was in the corner of the room in a dark corner, and you had no idea even who the DJ was when you would go to a show. You were there just listening to music, and that was part of it. And then you've got the other extreme where you go to a festival today and you can't even see the DJ. You have no idea who they are, but it's all about the show and the spectacle and the explosions and the LED screens and whatever. So there's all different extremes of this, and everybody makes their own choices about how they want their show to be. But all of those things, now going back to the topic of today, traveling, all of those things become part of the equation when you're making trade-offs for what will you travel with and what will you not travel with. None of us can bring our entire studio with us on a plane to go to a show. And so by our nature, we have to make decisions of the things that we have and the things that we use. Okay. See if there's any other questions, and then we'll move on. Let's see. Modbap Trinity. Yes, that's a great module. Do you find yourself changing sidechain settings on the Exelon during a set? I do, actually, because the sidechain is assignable by channel. So there's times where I want to unassign the sidechain to certain things because I just want to, let's say, sidechain my bass to my kick for a part of the show, because I've got a kick and bass that are kind of similar in frequency, and I want to make them fit better together. Then maybe there's other parts of the show where it's not really about fitting things into a mix with compression, but it's about sidechain to like get pumping to create energy in a mix. And in that case, I would sidechain everything. I would change the settings for the sidechain because I want it being triggered by a different frequency for different in different moments. So as an example, if I was going to sidechain my bass to my kick, I would want the sidechain triggered by the low end of the kick, those frequencies that are overlapping with the bass. So when those frequencies go up, the bass gets ducked down. Where if I'm going to do something where it's going to be kind of pumping sidechain, that it doesn't really matter the frequency, it matters more the timing. So I'm going to change the frequency of where that the bandpass filter triggers the sidechain up to where the transient is of the kick. So every time that transient click hits, it ducks things dramatically at that moment. So yeah, I'm constantly adjusting those sidechain settings. And then the main sidechain knob, which is right here, this is the amount of sidechain. So you can have, here we'll just do like, so if I've got a kick here and I've got, let's just do, pitch this down a bit. So let's say that arpeggiation, I wanted to sidechain that to my kick. I can turn the frequency up, and if you watch, as I turn this knob, it's gonna do more ducking. So as I turn that up, I can get to basically complete ducking. Now, if I was to change where the frequency was that was triggering that ducking and move it down lower, it basically ducks nonstop because those low frequencies on my bass or on my kick track are happening all the time. So it's ducking it to the point where you don't even hear it. But if you adjust the frequency up to where the transient is, see, you're getting a duck only when that transient hits. So having being able to adjust the settings of the sidechain is something that's really important, and it's something that I do constantly during a live performance. Oh, there we go. I had I had a pre-fader sound going in there that was really weird. Anyway, so yes. Let's see, where are we? A 10K setup, sure, yeah. Well, like I said, it can be any setup. It could be a $350 used Electron Digitact 1. I saw a show a couple years ago at Superbooth for their pre-show. I saw Cuckoo do a performance on a Digiton 1. So basically he had 4 tracks and that was it. And he did a whole hour-long live set. So it really comes down to what you want to do. Now, again, that 1 hour live set, he was hunched over one box doing this. And so what the audience saw was the back of his hands and the top of his head for the whole performance. Now, at that moment, he decided that performance part was less important than having a small portable rig that he could set up and take down quickly, that he could travel with easily. I totally get that. But the other side of it is, if you want to have other things that you can do during the performance that change things in a different way, you have more options, more flexibility, then you expand out to different things. But it's your choice. I will never say that you need all of this to do a show. It's just not the case. So let's see. Question, I'm going to be traveling to Mexico with my modular synth in the coming months. Can you give me some advice on getting through customs? I will tell you that I had never had a problem until my very last time coming into Mexico just a few weeks ago. And I got sent through the secondary screening at customs, and they said, you're not allowed to have all this stuff unless you have a thing that is basically a passport for your gear saying that you're going to take it out of the country. And if they go through and they see that it's more than a certain amount, they're going to make you pay tax on it, which I had to do, unfortunately, which was not good. Fortunately, it wasn't a lot of gear. So there's two ways that you can do it. There is an internationally recognized thing that I can't remember the name of it. If somebody knows, put it in the comments, which is basically a passport for your gear, and it's a complete listing of everything you have in your gear, and you have gotten it through your country. You apply for it in your country before you leave your country, and it's basically a guarantee that you will enter and exit with all of that gear. Now, when you go to a lot of countries, let's say you have a thing that has 10 pieces of gear on it, because that's what you travel with sometimes. But when you travel this time, you only travel with 9 pieces of gear. Then most countries will allow that as long as the gear is on the list. Mexico is one of a couple countries that do not allow that. So if it's not your complete listing that's on there, it doesn't count. And then they're going to try to get you to pay tax on everything. The other thing is you can apply through the Mexican consulate. I believe it's in Miami where they do this, Carnet Passage, exactly. You can apply, and it's basically a temporary like tools of the trade waiver with an entrance and an exit time for your specific list. And so what that's really designed for is, let's say there was going to be a big trade show in Mexico City for a certain type of equipment companies. Those companies can bring their samples and their things that they're going to use for that event, and then they leave with them afterwards. They're not bringing them in and then selling them off when they're done. And so you can get that one as well. That one is through the Mexican consulate. Yeah, so it's, I would have, up until this last trip, I would have said, don't worry about it. It's never a problem. But what I will tell you now is that it's not usually a problem, and it's never a problem until it is. And it was this last time. So I would be careful about that. So I would say either if you have a set rig that you travel with a lot and you're going to travel to multiple countries, pay the money to get the Carnet de Passage, the ISA Carnet, I think it's called, or whatever. Get that one. It costs a couple $100 to get it, and then you have it. It's good for a year. And if not, if it's just going to be a single trip with a set rig and it's just Mexico, I would apply through the Mexican consulate in Miami, and you can do that stuff online and tell them what you need and get it's like a waiver that gets set up for that. Okay. Let's see. Thanks so much. You're welcome. Okay. You'll be using 10% of the features of the setup is capable of. TR-1000 and Tonewerk is more than enough. Exactly. I said the same thing. I don't use, and I am not a proponent of making or like forcing yourself to use everything that a piece of gear does just because it does it. Just because something does something doesn't mean you have to use it. It means you can. It means it's available to you. So yes, I could do my entire live setup. I could do my whole live show on the 1010 Bento, the entire thing, without anything else. And so could you. You could do it on one thing. You could do a whole show on a TR-1000. You could do a whole show on a Tonewerk. You could do a whole show just in a modular. Like this modular case, I could do a whole show just with this, and that's it. So yes, you can do it with just that. But to say that it's enough to be capable of doing something, and you wouldn't even actually need a TR-1000 and a Tonewerk. You can do it just with one or the other. And that would be enough to be capable of doing a set. And you don't need more than that. But you can choose to have more than that because you have other priorities other than tech spec. I can show you how much I can do with one thing, right? That's one way of doing it, absolutely. But it's not the only way to do it. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that there is no right answer or wrong answer. There's what's right for you and what's wrong for you. For you, it may be interesting enough to do something on one box or two boxes. For other people, they may want more boxes. Some people want to play keys. Other people want to use sequencers. Some people like the tactile side of modular. Other people don't mind using a MIDI controller and a laptop. All of that is fine. All of that is valid. What you actually could do if you wanted to is you could do your entire show on your phone. That's totally doable as well. I could just take my phone, I could connect that with an audio cable, I could use AUM and a bunch of plugins, and I could do everything on my phone. But an audience sitting there watching me go like this would not be as interesting as an audience watching somebody, manipulate a big modular system. And so again, part of it's the performance, and part of it is what is the capability of the gear to make the music, right? And there's, again, no right and wrong answer. It's what's right for you, what's wrong for you, okay? My personal opinion. Let's see, Serbia here, awesome. Hopefully I'll be near you soon. On a trip around the world, only sound recorder, to use it later in live mixes. Yeah, that's really cool too. I got recently the Zoom, which one is it? The H1N, really tiny little recorder, super, super tiny. You can put it in your pocket. It records in 32-bit float, so you can get really good audio quality no matter where you are. Having that to be able to record stuff is really interesting. And so, yeah, I love the idea. If you go on to Dave Meck's YouTube channel, he did this series years ago that I wish he would do more of because it was really fun. And it was basically where he would go to a city, like maybe he had a show there or he was going on vacation. He would go to a city and he would sample the city, you know, the sound of the subway and the train horns and a police siren and people talking, whatever. He would get all these samples that were specific to that city, and then he would use those samples to make a track. And I think on his website or on his Patreon, he actually had sample packs that he sold that were sample packs of cities. So it was like, here's a sample pack of Brussels, here's a sample pack of Paris or whatever. And I thought it was a great idea and would love to see him do more of it. So I've actually told him that a couple times. I wish he would do more. It was a great thing. Let's see here. What's up, James? Good to see you. Good to see you. Yes, Carnet de Passage. Is this the travel setup? Looking savage. So this would be the travel setup if I had somebody traveling with me. So when I went to Superbooth, I had the advantage that my wife traveled with me, and the TR1000 was actually her carry-on, so that I could bring the rest of this, because I don't want to check any of my gear, because if it doesn't make it or if something happens to it on the trip, it makes it so that I can't play my show on the other end. So I take everything on the plane. So I did take basically this whole setup, more or less. I didn't have the Swarm with me, but yeah, everything else came with me on that trip. And so I was able to do it because I had somebody else who could carry the TR1000. Now, for this next trip, I'll be going by myself, so I can't take all of this as a carry-on rig. I can't take it all because it doesn't all fit, unfortunately. If the TR1000 was like 1 inch smaller, width-wise, I could take it. But it doesn't fit in the carry-on limitations. So because of that, I won't take this, but everything else, modular, mixer, MIDI controllers, and Tonewerk all fit inside a single rolling carry-on. And then I have my regular backpack, and I'll just take the bento in there so I could use it on the plane. And yeah, so that way everything will fit into the bag. And sometimes what I do to kind of save space and weight is I'll take like cables and things, and maybe I'll put them in another bag if I do check one, just because those are less important. If something doesn't arrive in that case, I can always get a cable on the other end, but I can't always get the full device on the other end. So yeah. Let's see, Cosmic Debris in the little skiff. Yeah, I actually have right now my 2 effects sends, so Desmodus Versio and Cosmic Debris, in a little tiny skiff here, because I was moving them out of my my main rig, because I'm going to be making a change coming up before my trip to Europe, where my 2 effect sends are now going to be an Eventide H90. Because it has 2 stereo ins and 2 stereo outs, and you can run those in parallel as 2 completely separate signal paths. So it's basically like having 2 pedals in 1 pedal. And those are switchable to all of the Eventide algorithms, and I can switch them during performance. So my 2 effect sends can then be kind of an infinite number of settings and effects for different moments in the performance. So that's going to be switching out. So that's one reason why these have moved from the case to a small little skiff. And eventually this small little skiff will be replaced by the H90. So that way I'll be able to have that done. Let's see. Oh, gotta go. See you soon. Take care. I think this whole rig is still less than the first year of depreciation on a new truck. Yeah, exactly. And I don't have a new truck, so I have gear instead. And again, it's really funny because, you know, everybody wants to, you know, you can say, well, it's not worth it, it's worth it, it's expensive, it's not expensive. We all make changes, we all make choices in our lives about what we want. So, I don't have a mortgage anymore because that wasn't important, and being able to not have that money made me be able to afford some other things. I don't spend a lot of money on, you know, going out and partying and stuff like that, which some people choose to do. Great. That's what you want to spend your money on. I prefer to spend my money on this. I like to think of this stuff as a savings account that I can play, because all of this stuff maintains a certain amount of its value. I mean, yeah, some things depreciate more than others, but if I wanted to sell my TR1000 tomorrow, I could sell it for what I bought it for, because it holds its value. Other things I can sell for more or less, and I've gotten a lot of use out of it. So for me, that's kind of like a rental fee. So it's not like it's money that you've just burned, which, a lot of people go out and burn a lot of money on a Friday night or a Saturday night doing a lot of things that I wouldn't do. So everybody makes choices, but you got to choose what you want to spend your money on. And yeah, this is what I choose to spend my money on. And I will say, in fairness, I do get some of this stuff for free from companies. And I've been very upfront about that there are certain companies that I work with that send me pieces of equipment that, because they want to see if I like it, and because they know if I like it, I'll use it, then it'll show up in these streams and you'll see it, and it's like an ad. But you won't see me do any ads for equipment that I don't like or that I don't use. And that's one of the reasons why the gear you see, I don't talk bad about it, not because I am just, shining everybody that gives me gear. It's because if I don't like something, it just doesn't show up on my channel, because I would rather only talk about things that I like and that I use. So yes, I have had people send me things, the Drop, Exelon SL, the Oxy One, a bunch of modules, the Bento, absolutely. And then there's things that I've bought on my own, like the TR1000, like the Tonberg. So there's a combination of that, and yeah. So everybody to each their own what they choose to spend their money on. Let's see, fully loaded Eurorack case must weigh a ton. It does, but surprisingly less than you would think. I mean, the cases are built to be, well, it depends. If it's a travel case, like this Morph modular case, or like some of the other ones, they're built to be pretty light. So you've got the weight of the modules, but again, if you've got a bunch of digital modules that aren't, these big heavy analog things, yeah. But yes, it does weigh a ton. It's not lightweight. Fortunately, the vast majority of airlines do not check the weight of the carry-on. Now, if you're on Ryanair or EasyJet or Vueling or one of the small airlines in Europe, they do check sometimes, not always. And so you do have to worry about that. They always check your check-in bags, but they don't always check your carry-on bags. So when you're the weight, I mean, they'll check the size. So if you fit the size and the weight is reasonably close, and you don't look like you're like struggling with your bag as you're going onto the plane, you don't draw attention to yourself. They don't necessarily check that as much, right? Any advice for in-ear headset to use in a show? Price range, ideal number of drivers, for example? Thanks. That's a great question, and I've kind of gone back and forth with that. I got these new ones recently, which are, I can't even remember the name of them. I would have to look it back up again. And they sound phenomenal, and that's kind of why I got them. And they're like known as being studio kind of flat response rather than heavy, rather than kind of a heavy low end, which is what most like AirPods and things like that would be, because you want it with those things, you want them to sound good when you're listening to it, and when you're trying to mix live or mix in a studio, you want it to sound correct, so that when it comes out of the speakers, it's correct. So like, for example, if I have something that boosts the low end, and I'm using headphones or in-ears that boost the low end, and I'm using that to mix my sound, and I say, oh, okay, well, my low end's really loud, so I'm gonna bring that down so that it sounds right in my headphones. The speakers aren't boosting the low end. They're coming out at a normal response. So then your low end will not sound correct. So you wanna have kind of a flat response. And so that's where you get into, I would look for, whether it's in-ear monitors or headphones or anything like that, I would look for the flattest possible frequency response. So you don't want it to boost or cut. And obviously, to get to the flattest possible, you get to more and more and more expensive. You know, that's one of the things that expensive headphones do, where they will reproduce lower end frequencies and they will have a flatter frequency response. Etymotic, exactly. Thank you for posting that in there. I was looking at the little case and it says ETY and I couldn't remember what it was. So yeah, I just got these, and I did do some research on these. There's kind of two different levels. There's like a pro level and the next level down. The next level down is what I ended up getting because they had the same frequency response with a tiny little exception, and so it wasn't worth double the price for me to get that. I also would recommend there's a set of Sennheiser in-ears that kind of the wrap around your ear type of in-ears that I use. I've got them over there. That I have used for shows for a while now, and their version that's like $100 has been really great. I like the isolation, which is really important for me to not get set frequencies that kind of influence your mix from outside of your in-ears. So that's been important for me, and the Sennheisers as well as the Etymotic ones have been really good for that. So that would be my advice. I think the number of drivers, I go back and forth about that because I've listened to some that are, you know, multi-driver, single driver, dual driver. It's just like it's really more about the individual one, the even frequency response and isolation. Those like are the two biggest things for me. Drivers can recreate more detail, which can be important in certain circumstances, but it can be less important in others. So yeah, it's really going to be a personal preference thing, but I've had really good luck with the Sennheisers and really good luck with the Etymotics as well. Got the M8, cool. I was thinking about doing the same thing with the H90 once I got the XL, perfect for this. Yeah, it's kind of like made for it. I know that Adam from BoardBrain has an H90 and has used it together and absolutely loves it. I love the flexibility of the H90. I love the fact that I can have two pedals in one that are both changeable and that it's one power supply. Because again, when you think about travel and how you're going to take your gear with you, having one power supply when you get to a place to connect is even more important. You know, sometimes you don't have enough plugs, you don't have enough power strips. And so it's just those little details can be really helpful. And it's a matter of traveling with one less power brick. So a little less weight as well. M8 is a neat device, I agree. I love the M8, the form factor. I love the industrial design of the machine. I don't get along well with trackers, like as far as the workflow goes, because I prefer a much more kind of organic, improvised, spontaneous workflow, where the tracker type of workflow is very much kind of micromanaging by step. So for me, I felt like it was kind of in the way of my music, which was unfortunate because I love the machine itself. I love the shape. If I was going to get a tracker, it would be absolutely an M8, 100%. Let's see, on the modular, do you use any effects on the battering ram Bohm combo, or do the Bohm Groove do all the effects? So for like, as far as processing, nothing. Everything is, the Bohm is dry coming into the mixer, and the battering ram is dry coming into the mixer. Now in the mixer, I have a little bit of compression on each of them, kind of depending on the settings that I have those on. So like with the Bohm, I tend to use the punch setting of the compressor because I like the transient punch already that comes from the Bohm, and I think the compressor in the SL kind of emphasizes that, and it's really good. Whereas with the battering ram, I use it as a secondary kick, so it would be like I'll have the Bohm like this, and then the battering ram will be a secondary kick. That's a lot of steps in there, isn't it? So you can hear how it's like, it's a different type of sound. It's more low end, it's more rounded. So I use the regular compressor settings more on the battering ram than the punch one, because for that secondary kick, I'm not looking for additional transient. I want the transient to really be 4 on the floor coming from the boom, and so that's why I use the 2 different compressor settings. So yeah, I do a little processing here, sometimes a little EQ with the single knob EQ here, but for the most part, they're coming out dry. The boom has processing internally, so it side chains the groove part to the main kick already internally. And I don't, right now in this setup, I don't use the Performer. Because since I started using the Exelon SL, I don't need the side chaining because I have the side chaining in my mixer. And so that way I didn't need to put my whole mix back through the boom and then back to go out. So I just don't use the Performer in this configuration at all because my side chain is all coming from inside the Exelon. Okay. Let's see. I love the noise isolation of Etymotic. I use them on the airplane. Yeah, they're great. They've been great, and I just got them recently, so I've just been kind of messing with them. What I wanted was something really small that I didn't have to wrap around my ears like the Sennheisers, so that I could use the Bento on a plane with headphones instead of having to have big headphones with it. And that was kind of the driving thing. And now I'm using them in studio a lot because they're just comfortable. Yeah, so the noise isolation is great, and I like the flat response. I think the response is what I'm looking for in a monitoring, in an in-ear monitor rather than in a listening set of headphones. I listen in my AirPods all the time to regular music, and even my my regular headphones, which I listen to a lot, are these DJ headphones that I use. These boost bass, and things sound great in them, but it's not flat. So if you're trying to mix sound with those, you're not going to get a flat mix. You're going to get a bass light mix because the drivers in the headphones drive the bass extra. So when you make it sound balanced to your ear, you're actually going to have an output that has lower level bass than what you're hearing. So let's see. Hey, do you still use the combo board brain monitor Melotus Versio Oxy Meta as your end of chain? It was great to meet you in Brussels. Great to meet you as well. And it's actually not Melotus Versio, it's Polydactyl Versio. I have the wrong faceplate. So if you saw that by taking a picture or by looking at my rig, it's I just have flashed a different firmware in there. So it's actually the Polydactyl Versio. And that is normally what goes in this little skiff. But I don't need an end of chain right now while I'm in studio and before I go play. But when I go out to play, this will have this combo right here, which is, it looks like Melotus, but it's actually Polydactyl Versio monitor and Oxy Meta. And that is, I go out from my main out of the mixer. So everything gets mixed here, processed, all of that stuff. My main output, instead of going direct to the house, goes through that chain, which fits into this little box right here, goes through that chain and then out from the monitor to the house. And so what that gives me is an end of chain kind of DJ style effect with the Meta. So I get like filtering or reverb or whatever I want as kind of like, risers or things like that from the Meta. And then the Polydactyl Versio is my absolute favorite end of chain thing at all, pedal or modular or device or anything, because it is a 3-band limiter and saturator. Now it also has 3 bands of compression, which I don't use. It's got upward and downward compression. I just leave it in the middle, so there's no compression either way on any of the bands. And then I boost low and high with the limiter and leave the mid where it is so that it creates a mid scoop to take out some of the mud from the mix while boosting my low end and my high end, which is what gives you more kind of punch and impact in a live performance. So I love this one device. That master saturator sounds amazing to thicken up your mix and to make it sound mastered. So yeah, the combination of that and the multi-band limiting is amazing. So yeah, that's my my magic bullet for my end of chain. because as you guys know, if you've watched any of these streams before, I am not a fan of compression on your end of chain, because I think it hurts as much as it helps, and oftentimes more than it helps. But limiting and saturation, absolutely the things that makes your mix sound amazing in the end, makes things sound mastered. So yeah, let's see what else do we have here. Just joined, so apologies, it's been mentioned already. What are the two modules between the oxy and the mult in the bottom right? Yeah, so that's what I was just talking about. This is actually polydactyl Versio, so ignore the faceplate, because I don't have the faceplate for the polydactyl Versio, but I flashed the firmware. So this is polydactyl Versio, and this is the board brain monitor, which is an output module. So I can take my main signal through this. I can come in 3.5 millimeter, which is what comes out of the polydactyl Versio, into this. Then I have line level 1/4 inch outputs with volume control and its own headphone monitor here. So it gives me kind of all of the output stuff that I want at the end, once I've gotten through everything. Now, if I wasn't going through these last two devices, I wouldn't need the monitor, because I would just come out of here 1/4 inch out, which I absolutely could do. I have a filter here, and I have analog drive per channel here. So the only thing I'm missing is the limiting, so I can saturate using drive instead of saturation. So it's not exactly the same thing, but can give you some of the same kind of results. And so I could do that. I just really love the sound of this. I love the way it sounds through the polydactyl Versio. Before I was using the Electron Analog Heat Plus effects, and I've used other devices as well, end of chain, and this is still my favorite of all of them. So yeah, it's a cool sounding thing. Let's see, still using WMD clutch for its flow, groove, parameter, archer's rig for hats. In this setup, I didn't have room for the clutch, unfortunately. It was the last thing that didn't make it into the case for this setup, but unfortunately there just wasn't enough real estate for it. And because on this trip I'll be using the Bento, I can put kind of similar types of percussion loops to what I was getting from the clutch, and I can just build them in Ableton with swing or with groove from the groove pool, and then I can just take that loop and load it into here. So when I was just kind of doing a one button thing through the clutch, I can do that through the Bento. With this, it's not exactly the same, but it will accomplish a lot of the same stuff in a set. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I wish that would be one thing that I would love to fit back in here, but just don't have the space for. And honestly, my live setup for this trip is not going to look exactly like this. I do have one other change. The SYO 0.5 and its filter are coming out. The battering ram is coming out, so I can move some stuff down here and make space on this row. And I'm putting in the IntelliGel Atlantics because I wanted an SH-101 voice. And I went back and forth between the Atlantics and the Boutique 101, and I just kind of wanted it in the case. And so that's what won out. So that's going to be fitting in there. Let's see. Great answer on the in-ears. You're welcome. I'm glad you liked it. You think that the new WMD end of chain module will compare to polydactyl? Has the elusive bass mono as well? Yes, I do think it will compare. I got to hear it at Superbooth, and yes, I think that it will. It could potentially be another option for that end of chain thing. Again, I don't really am not really an end of chain compression person, and so that's less important to me. But the bass mono is amazing. It's something I can't do with this setup that is missing a little bit. Although with individual mono channels, most of the stuff stays mono. Where I would love to be able to mono low end frequencies is on my effects returns. So if I send stuff out to a big reverb and that reverb ends up spilling into the low end frequencies, it's going to create mud and issues in my mix. So if I could just mono that, it would be a help. But instead, what I do is I filter it. So it's another way to get there, but it's not two different ways to do a similar thing, but they're not the same. So anyway, but yes, I think that that module will definitely be an end of chain option for sure. Yeah, so if you have other questions, please pop them in there. Otherwise, just to show a couple of things and how they're working right now. When I was talking before about traveling and reducing down the things you bring, and there's also this element of reducing down your setup and breakdown, because there's already a lot of things. And, you know, obviously this is not a simple setup. So there's a lot of things already to plug in and unplug and whatever. So anywhere you can minimize that is always better. One of the things that that I think doesn't get talked about enough about the Noisite drop is how many devices it can take the place of in a portable live setup. Now, it's a fantastic MIDI controller, don't get me wrong, but for me, that's not the best part about it. You know, if it was just about being a MIDI controller, you could use the Drop, or you could use the Launch Control XL, or you could use, you know, there's a lot of them out there. I've got E16, which I love. There's a lot of MIDI controllers, but where the Drop really shines, besides the presets and the morphing and the drop functionality, which again, I don't really use because I don't pre-set up my shows. So I can't really pre-set up presets that I move from one to the other. If you need to do that, the Drop is great for that as well. But again, going back to what I said before, just because something does something doesn't mean you have to do it. You have to use it for that. You can use it for things that it does uniquely well that other things don't necessarily do, right? I have things that can play samples, Tonewerk, TR-1000, Bento, and you know, I have modules that can play samples as well. I have other samplers, but what I use to play longer time stretched samples is the Bento because it does it better than the others. I don't use the Roland for samples very much because what it does well is drum synthesis. I don't use the Tonewerk for samples very much either because what it does really well is granular synth and wavetable synthesis. So yes, they can all do those things, but I choose to do certain things. The Drop is the same. Yes, it is a great MIDI controller and I use it as a MIDI controller, but as a side advantage, which I think is kind of a main advantage, it has USB-C in and out. It has CV and gate, 2 CV and 2 gate outputs. It has 4 MIDI ins and outs, separate paths. And all of those can be routed internally inside the settings of the device. So what you in effect have with all of that connectivity and the routing is as kind of a matrix of routing is you have MIDI mergers, you have MIDI dividers and splitters that can be divided up by individual paths to go out. So instead of having a bunch of little MIDI merger boxes to be able to, for example, with the Bento right now, I'm sequencing from the Oxy One and I'm using the Drop for a MIDI controller for faders and knobs, both to control the Bento. Normally, if this was a regular MIDI controller with faders and I wanted to use the Oxy One, I would need a MIDI merger box and the MIDI would have to come out of my MIDI controller and out of the Oxy One into the merger, and then it would have to go from there into the Bento. So it's another thing that I would need, another device plus multiple cables. What I have going right now is I have a single MIDI cable going from the Oxy to the Drop, and that's it. And that signal coming from the Oxy, the MIDI sequencing, is then going via USB-C cable as well to the Bento. That USB-C cable is also carrying all of the control from the Drop, right? So faders, knobs, all of that stuff is being merged inside the Drop and taken via USB-C. So I don't have MIDI cables, I don't have mergers, I don't have to worry about the TRS to MIDI, adapters, and is it TRS-A or TRS-B, and which adapter. There's a lot of stuff to deal with when it's that. This is USB, USB, and the drop itself merges those signals together to come out to here. Now, also from the Oxy, I'm sequencing the Tonewerk. And that same USB cable that's going into the drop is then taking a regular USB cable out from the drop into the Tonewerk. And again, not only do I have MIDI merging, but I have MIDI splitting or multiplying. It's not really splitting, it's actually multiplying the signal or replicating the signal. So you can take one USB cable and divide that signal or multiply that signal or assign that signal to go to different devices doing different things. So I have a whole sequencer sequencing different channels on the Tonewerk, and I have a sequencer sequencing different channels on the Bento. And all together, the Oxy is also sending clock to the drop, which is then sending clock to the Tonewerk, clock to the TR-1000, and clock to the Bento. And each one of those clock outputs has an individual offset inside the drop. So if I have latency, MIDI latency, clock latency, because of a certain device is not hearing the signal correctly, I can adjust that latency inside the drop by channel to make sure everything lines up together. So again, it's like finding the right piece of gear for the right thing. It's not just, I want this MIDI controller because it's the most expensive one out there and I want to have a cool MIDI controller. If it was MIDI controller, that's all you need, absolutely choose the Launch Control XL, because it is a fantastic MIDI controller. It does that thing really, 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 really well. But it doesn't do MIDI merging, it doesn't do clock offset, it doesn't do, so again, it's just not the same thing. They look on the surface like the same thing, but if you're not digging into how they actually work, then you're not going to be able to figure out what is right for you for your setup, right? There's other things that are like interesting capabilities. If you're going to use something like the TR-1000 and the Bohm, which I do in my live set, and you wanted to layer an analog 909 kick with a Bohm kick in order to be able to get all of that control, you could do a 4 on the floor here and do a 4 on the floor here with the Bohm and have them line up. But if you changed any of those settings, you would have to change it on 2 different sequencers. The other thing that you can do, again, thinking about the deeper capabilities of devices that make them more capable for travel because they're more flexible, all of the individual outputs on the back of the TR-1000 can be assigned in the settings to be either audio or CV. So I can set an analog 909 on track 1. I can set my track 1 output to not be audio, but to be CV. And I can use a 1/4 inch to 3.5 cable out of that to trigger my Bohm. Then my sequence here for channel 1, for track 1, is triggering the analog 909 and the Bohm at the same time. So if I change the sequence, my layer stays intact and it changes with it. So again, these things aren't just expensive because they're expensive or just expensive because they have a certain name on them. A lot of them are expensive because they do things that other things don't do that you may or may not need. And so that's why when people say, is this one better? Well, if better is it does more things, then sure, it's better. But better might be it does exactly the things you want for a far cheaper price. That's better in that case. So again, always trade-offs. There's constant trade-offs with all of this gear. But being able to have the capability. So for example, if I bring up, this is my Bento channel here, and I hit play. So my one-shots over here, which I have as set up similarly to my TR-1000 on these faders. So let's say if on my TR-1000, I wanted to have a ride. Ooh, I have to bring that up. So I have a ride on my TR-1000, but I also have a ride here, which is coming from the Bento. And if I want to have an open hat here, I have an open hat. And if I want to pitch it the same, so then I can pitch it. Right? So I've got the same thing. Hi-hat, slightly different tuning because I was playing around with things differently. Claps. Rim shot. Yeah, I pitched that one way down. Toms. Another tom. And then this is kick drum, which I don't use this as kick. I use these as samples on here, like one-shot percussive things for different things like that. So I didn't transfer that across because I've got those at other places in the bento. So what I did do is I've got my bone kick, which is here, and then I also have a kick here, which I don't have sequenced right now. That's why. Yeah, I have this set up as an 808 because what I wanted to be able to do, knowing that I was going to be using it with the bow, was to be able to sequence in kind of rhythmic low end stuff. And then pair that with my regular 4 on the floor bow. So I can use right now, if I wanted to, the TR-1000. Right, so I could use that combination, or I could use and I can have a similar combination here. So yes, in this context of being here in the studio where I have all of the gear, it's overkill, 100%. I don't need that. But what I've been doing is with these things next to each other, trying to set this up in a similar way to this with sounds that I can manipulate in a similar way. So again, if I was going to use my hats here, my open hat, one of the things that I love to be able to do is to be able to change tuning or change reverb send with that. So I wanted to set this up so that with my open hat, I have tuning. So I can change that, and I've got delay send, reverb send, and then I have a filter as well. Right? So I have a bunch of controls that I can do here, just like now, one thing to show you again what the trade-offs are, with the TR-1000, because this is coming from a synth engine, I can change the decay. So if let's say I've got my hat going this way, and my closed hat going this way too, and I want to do a breakdown where I add some energy, I can do that by changing up the decay and bringing that energy in and bringing the kick back in. With this kick, or with this combination, I can add reverb to do that, which kind of stretches it out, but it doesn't really add decay. I don't have decay control because I'm not using a synth engine. I'm using a sample that has an end to its hit. One of the things that I would recommend is if you're going to use samples and you want to be able to manipulate them in a similar way as you would with a synth, I would suggest that you dial in the sound that you like. So for example, if I was going to do open hat, let's say this is the sound I really liked for this hat. So I could sample this as it is and load it into the Bento and use it, but I would only have that length of decay. So what I would generally do is, if you're going to do a sample that you're going to use in a performance, I would extend the decay, even if that's not the exact sound you want. Record it with the decay as wide as you can and your filter wide open on that. And then when you load it into your sampler, then you'll have an envelope for that sample, and you can then shorten the decay of your envelope, and you can bring it back, and it gives you the flexibility to open it or close it. You can't open or lengthen the decay on a sample that doesn't have a long decay. You can only shorten. So if you're going to record samples in for live performance, I would always suggest lengthening them out rather than taking just a pluck. Take a pluck, make it the way you like it, and then open the filter and open the envelope, and then sample the one shot. Then load it into your sampler and use the envelope and the filter to close those things back down to the sound that you had that you liked, while maintaining the flexibility to open it up and lengthen it out. So it just gives you a lot more flexibility. So again, this is the trade-off. I can use the Bento and have, and have sounds like this. Take my delay off there. So I can have a sound like this, but I can't lengthen it out. I could shorten it. So if I was to go into this, I can actually go into here and shorten. I can shorten the decay on this, but I can only lengthen it to there. That's as far as it opens. But I can shorten it down to that. Okay, it's one reason too, whenever I'm setting up sample-based drum kits, and I used to do this when I had the Digitact in my setup as my drums. One of the things that I would always do is, even on my closed hat channel, it was never a closed hat sample. It was always an open hat sample that I would shorten down to a closed hat, or a long shaker that I could tighten up to a tight, closed hat shaker sound. So always give yourself some flexibility if you can. And as I get ready for this this trip, one of the things that I'm going to be doing is redoing a bunch of these samples so that I have long decay samples, so that I can then add my decay here, because decay is one of my favorite tools to use in live performance to add energy and to add tension, is to lengthen out decays and make things sound a bit messy. And so I want to have that flexibility in my drum samples, and so I'm going to record a bunch of new samples in order to do that. So I would suggest you do the same if you want to keep that same kind of flexibility. All right, let's see what else we got here. Drop is definitely incredible for MIDI merge routing. Also lots of great CV stuff for the new firmware. Yeah, and he just keeps coming out with new stuff. It was funny, I talked to Thomas at Superbooth, and he asked me, what would you like to see in the drop for functionality? And I said, I would like to see you take a break from adding things, because I can't keep up, because he's just constantly adding new functionality. If you use the drop with your with a DAW now, like with Ableton, you can set the knobs to be like VU meters. They can be like your volume meters, and they will give live real-time feedback from your DAW. Like, he's putting in functionality like that, which is just absolutely insane. So yeah. Let's see, what are some of the drum parameters you map to drop from Bento? Maybe decay for pitch for short. Yeah, I just kind of went through that a little bit. I will map decay once I have samples that have longer decay. And so I like to have the same kind of parameters like what I've set up on the TR-1000, which is decay, tuning, pitch, so that I can pitch things properly into a mix and shift the sound around and make it sound like different things. And then effects, so sends for delays and reverbs. So that's probably what the knobs will be. Now, another thing the drop has that's really cool is it's got dual layers, and I have the faders set up. So on layer A and layer B, the faders don't change. It's the same things on both sides. So if I've got them set this way and I go to layer B, those are all still correct. right? And if I move them on layer B and I move back to layer A, they're all still correct. So these never change. But I have all of these knobs that can change. So what I'll likely do is I'll have one bank of knobs that are sound shaping. So like pitch, decay, things like that. And then I'll have another bank that are like effect sends and kind of manipulation ones. So I can, switch back and forth for the exact same 8 sounds. And so it gives me basically 8 knobs and a fader for every single one of the sounds. So that's where I will end up, but I'm kind of slowly building this out right now because I just set up the Bento this last week, now that I figured out how I want to use it. So yeah, perfect timing, yeah. Let's see. Hey, what's going on? Happy surprise. Yes, it is a surprise stream. Surprise, here I am. I've been sampling the Archer's rig for hats with long decays. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a TR-1000 and I've got kind of unlimited sample one-shots, and yet I still have the Archer's rig in my modular. And the main reason is because when I hit my Archer's rig here, I have all this flexibility to be able to change it around to different things. Right? So having that hands-on control, like what I was saying with the TR-1000, the reason I love to perform with the TR-1000 is I have all this hands-on control over these individual synth engines. With the Archer's rig, it's like having one channel of that. It's like having just the hi-hat channel of that, and I love it. I will tell you also, soon you'll be seeing on this channel the Shockmat Lancer's Lash, which is their snare module, but it's also really flexible to be able to do other types of percussion with the same kind of controls as the Archer's rig, and it is so good. Can't wait to get it. So that will be hopefully soon. Let's see. Ooh, here comes the thunder again. I may have to call it soon, but if we cut off, it's because I've lost internet here in rural Mexico. Let's see. I was thinking about this the other day, how Speedy J has a 16th note signature hat. He probably has really long sample and use the envelope. Yeah, and that's the thing, like there's certain things, like if you wanted to have something that you always use, like for example, one of the things Speedy J uses all the time, and I know he's got it on one of it, I think it's on the regular 909, is he has just a 16th note snare. And so there's times where he'll just bring in the snare on 16th notes because it is what it is. He brings it in, he has like a snare roll, and then he takes it out, and it's just a snare roll that's there waiting to happen. So yeah, absolutely. Set things up for how you're going to use them. Good to see you too. Drop can do 8 layers now. Yes, it's nuts. It is totally nuts. Hope to see you at KnobCon. I don't think I will be at KnobCon this year, unfortunately. 8 layers and the shift layer functionality are, yeah, the drop just gets crazier and crazier all the time. Like I remember whenever, I felt the same when the drop came out as when the TR-1000 came out. Instantly, everybody was just up in arms. Oh my God, it's so expensive. It's crazy. Why would anyone spend that? It's like, well, yeah, but if you had 8 MIDI controllers with 16 MIDI mergers and MIDI dividers and a clocking system and all, and an ERM multi-clock and all that stuff, it would be way more than the drop. And the same thing with the TR-1000. If you had all of these analog devices, plus synthesis, plus samples, plus sequencing, plus the audio quality, plus all that, yeah, it would be way more. So it's not a matter of, yes, it's expensive, but that doesn't mean that it's too expensive. It just means that it is what it is, The Exelon SL is $1,800, but if you were to do all of this stuff with trying to do it with individual things like pedals or modular, you'd spend 4 or 5 times that to do what this does. So yes, it is expensive. I'm not saying it's not. It's absolutely expensive, but it is kind of value per money. It does what it does, and that's just kind of it. Let's see. If Exelon mixer size is similar to the Hapax, TR-1000 size is massive. Yes, This is similar to Hapax. TR1000 is about the size, it doesn't look like it because of the camera angle, but the TR1000 is about the size of a 7U84 case. It's slightly wider. But yes, it is massive. This width of the Exelon is exactly the width of an Octatrack. So if you're curious size-wise what these are, this is closer to the camera right now, so it does look a little bigger. But yeah, it's not small by any stretch of the imagination. Let's see here. Been waiting for Lancer's Lash for so yeah, it's coming soon. They said they have some that they're sending out to us for final testing, so that means it's about to ship. Nice vid, thanks. Hey everyone, what's going on? It's actually coming. Been waiting for Lancers for a long time. Yeah, it's actually coming. Did you get any insight as to what's delayed the Lancers? Yeah, I mean, I'll give you my insight into what delays all of Shachmat's things. They're not really delayed. The thing is, Shachmat shows things at Superbooth long before they're ready to come out because they like to get feedback from people and then they go back and make modifications and changes. Then they show them the next year at Superbooth so they can get more feedback and then they do modifications and changes and then it's ready to be released. And they are super anal retentive, just like BoardBrain, just like a lot of these companies, Noisite, about the details of how things work. The curves of certain movements of things and adjusting the limits of parameters and frequencies and all of that stuff. So they go back and they redo and they redo and they redo and they test. So what a normal company would do is they would get the Lancer's Lash, for example, when it's ready, once they've made all their decisions, then they would show it at Superbooth and say, yeah, it's going to come out in a month. It'll be ready to ship. We're already building them. But these guys don't do that because they want feedback and they want to modify their gear and make it the best it can possibly be before they put it out, rather than thinking they have all the answers. And then it's just like, surprise, here it is. It's everything we think it should have. They want to know what the users think. And so that's why Shachmat does that. That's why, BoardBrain does that. And there's a few other companies that do that as well. So yes, it is coming. But that's the insight as to why it has not necessarily delayed, but why it's taken 2 years from the first time you heard about it until it will actually ship. That's their development process. That's how they do things. And it was the same with Battering Ram, Archer's Rig, Ballista Blast was the same, Griffin's Claws was the same. Ballista Blast was shown 2 years ago at Superbooth as well. And it changed a lot in the interim before it came out. So yeah, it's there's been a lot of things that have gone into those things and changed those over time. So don't think of it as delay. Think of it as part of the development process. That's a normal part of the development process for them. I am going to change something really quick here in my settings. That was the wrong way. There we go. Yeah, to be able to see you guys better. We're getting a storm going through, and so everything is overcast and gray, and I have natural light coming from a window right here, and so that's why all of a sudden I was in the dark because it got dark outside. Let's see, any other questions you guys have? I just want to show you really quick before we end up losing our internet signal here, how this is kind of going through. So again, I've got things that are inside the bento as one-shots. And again, all these effects and pitch and filtering and all of that stuff is controlling all of that stuff that is inside the bento. Okay, so these are controlling that over USB-C after having been merged with this sequence that you can see here. I'll go back to this view. Yeah. So these 8 tracks are these 8 tracks are these 8 tracks. So sound source and output, and then this is coming out via audio into a channel here. So then I also have the ability to add send effects if I want to, or compress if I want to, or EQ if I want to, or change my gain, or overdrive, or any of that stuff. I can do that. I can pitch here. I can pan here. So a lot of things. And as I showed before, so let's say I have all of that. I've got my kick here. Actually, go back and take these little ghost nuts out of the kick, so it's really 4 and 4. Ooh, there's some thunder for you. So this is everything all together, but now I can sidechain all of my drums by assigning the sidechain. All the way down to there. And if I want to shorten that, so that's sidechaining my entire drum mix other than the kick to the kick if I want to. So it gives me a lot of interesting capabilities to be able to do that kind of stuff here, right? So again, MIDI merging, MIDI splitting, whatever. And this, going back to the topic for today of travel, what's important for this is now, in order to set up my sequencer, my control, and my, my sample player, I just need 2 USB cables. 1 USB out, 1 USB back, and that's it. And I have everything controlled and merged and clocks adjusted and all of that stuff happening. So again, choosing the right gear for your particular scenario is really important. If you don't need this, the drop is totally overkill if you don't need this stuff. But if you do need that stuff, this saves you time, money, space, weight, hassle setting up, because you don't have a bunch of merger and splitter boxes and a whole bunch of MIDI cables and TRS to DIN MIDI adapters and all that stuff. So it saves you in the long run if it's what you need. If it's not what you need, then you're wasting your money, or you just have the cool thing just to have the cool thing. So, and you notice what I say, I'm not saying if you need every single thing that it does, because I'm only using a fraction of what the drop can do. But that fraction is still more valuable for me than having multiple MIDI controllers and splitter and merger boxes and all of that stuff. So it's all goes back to what's your value for your use case, right? For me, that's a value. And so I just think everybody has to make their own decision. This is a value for me, this is a value for me, each thing. But it may not be for you, because it may not be what you need. It may be overkill, or it may not do the thing you need that I don't necessarily need. So it all comes down to what's best for you. Okay. Let's see. Yes, they do have a lot of thought put into them. Literally cannot wait for the SL to arrive. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. There's a lot of other little mixers. I agree. And I agree too. That new Korg one that came out looks super cool. If what you need is a little mixer to just mix sounds together, it's solid built, it's metal, it's cool, it's only a couple $100. Like, that's awesome. I would totally get one of those if that's what I needed. Just like a little thing to mix sounds together. There is nothing else out there for live performance that is an actual performance mixer. And I've talked about this a bit before, but for me, a couple things you need to have to be a performance mixer. You need to have effect sends, and you need to have faders. And there are things out there like the Jelly Mix and like others that have effect sends, but they don't have faders. Then there's other things out there that have faders, but they don't have effect sends, or they don't have only one, or it's only pre-fader, or they have only mono channels, or like the what was the one that came out at Superbooth that's like super expensive? They do a DJ mixer. And then they made one that could be Eurorack or not. I want to say UL or something like that. I can't remember. But theirs is interesting. They have, I think, 6 tracks in theirs, and the tracks can be either mono or stereo. And so again, you lose a lot of flexibility for your gear. With this one, you've got 8 tracks that can be either stereo or dual mono. So if you have only mono, you can have 16 tracks on this. You just share, every pair shares a channel strip. So for example, like if you have two hi-hats, you can plug them both into the same one, two kicks, you know, things like that. So you don't have to take up a separate channel. And with those ones, if you want something to be mono, you just plug it into a stereo channel, but you lose a whole stereo channel to have a mono device. So again, I agree there's a lot of things out there. Some of them are very cool. A lot of them are a really good deal. Particularly the new Korg one, that price, I was really surprised at how inexpensive that was. I think it's really cool for the size. Amazing. If that's what you need. If you don't need the performance, you know, the performative aspects of it, it's really very cool. I would definitely take a look at that. Let's see. I like the way you explain all your setup. Thank you. Does this setup travel on the plane well? It does. Without this, like I said, this can only go with me if I have somebody else, because that way this can be their carry-on. Other than that, other than this machine, everything else you see here fits into a rolling carry-on. So it can go on the plane with me. Let's see, how do the inserts work versus the aux sends on the Exelon? You have 3 different effects units hooked up, 2 for aux sends, 1 for insert. Okay, so so you have your 2 regular effect sends, which are sending out in differing amounts. You have the control of the amount you're sending out of that signal. Where the insert effect, you don't have control over the outgoing amount to mix it. You have the control over sending it B or A, depending on how you switch this switch. And that will just route that signal out a path. And then you can come back in and you have control over the return, the mix A and the mix B return, but you don't have control over what's being sent. And you don't, there's no control over that. Now, what you would use those for is, let's say you wanted to do a drum processing bus, and let's say these 4 channels had drums on them. You could put them all on B. Then you could have on your B output, you could go out through, you know, a compressor, a saturator, an EQ, whatever, and then come back in. And these would all go out through that and then back into this mix input before it goes out the main through the filter and that stuff. So that's one way that you would use those inserts. Another way is if you're using the Octatrack with EasyBot's performance template, you can send mix A out to A and B, mix B out to C and D, and then have your returns come back out your main and your headphone back into these and assign them accordingly. And then you can assign which ones you want to be affected by the AB side of his effects and which one you want to be affected by the CD side of his effects. And then you can use his performance template with all of the different effects and loopers and all of that stuff, using these as your kind of pre-mix of what goes into each. And you can change what goes out each during your set by changing the assignment A or B, which they're going out. So if you want to use a looper, you could send just one track out, loop that one track, and play it on the Octatrack while you move forward. So there's a lot of possibilities. You could have the main of your Octatrack, then mix those together and come back into a channel here. Then you've got compression, you've got side chaining, you've got EQ, you've got another layer of effect sends. So you've got a lot of flexibility about how you could use it. The other thing about the mix bus out and back is that if you're not using the outputs to go out to something, you can use the returns as another set of stereo inputs. So for example, if I was short of channels here, I wouldn't put the TR-1000 through its own channel strip, because I don't really need the effects and the compression and the overdrive, because I have that in the TR-1000. So I could just have the TR-1000 coming back into mix A or mix B and just set the level and then do all of my volume level control and everything here and save me a channel. So you've got 2 additional stereo inputs if you've got mixing capability before it comes to the input. So you can use them in a lot of different ways. It just kind of depends on your use. And that's kind of the whole point. So let's see here. Basically I have a night verb and a Zen delay. I was thinking of using the aux sends, but also have an analog heat plus effects and source audio collider, delay and reverb. Yeah, so it just kind of depends. You could also chain those. You could have, effects one go out to your Zen delay and your analog heat plus effects, and then come back, and effects two go out through your night verb. And then if you want to use the Zen delay, you turn it up, and if you don't, you deactivate that thing. And so you've got like a pedal board. You've got a chain of effects, and you can decide which ones you use. And the control just gives you control over what signal's being sent through that path. So you could set it up in that way as well. Okay. Pretty much exactly what I was thinking. Awesome. Octatrack, I mean, we intentionally set this up so that it would work flawlessly with the Octatrack with Matthew's template, because we know a lot of users use that, and this was never intended to replace that. It replaces it as a mixer by being a very super functional sub-mixer and final output mixer, but the Octatrack is the mixer where you're dividing your signals to affect them differently and then putting them back together to come back in here. So it was really set up to be used flawlessly with Matt's templates. Let's see here. ToneWork, similar as well. With the inputs and outputs of the ToneWork, you can do a lot of this here. So if you wanted to, like, I'm going to use the H90 for my two effect sends, but I could also send my two effect sends to two different inputs. It would be mono, but it's fine because then the effect becomes stereo. I could send it to two different inputs in the ToneWork, and then I could go through two different channels with different effects, have those go back out through two different outputs and come back to the effects ins here. So then the ToneWork becomes my pedal, with my effect sends going down two different effects paths to two different buses that have two different sets of effects on them. So you could totally use this that way as well. So there's a lot of flexibility to go from this out to other things. And that's why we didn't build this as a digital mixer with effects built in, because that kind of says that's the way you use it. This way you can go out to anything you want or not, however you want to, and you've still got everything all analog in the mixer. So it was very intentional to set it all up like that. Let's see. Basically, this mixer is completely exploding everything that is possible. Yeah, totally. That was the whole thing. We've been saying for years, when is somebody going to make this? And when I first met Adam, our very first conversation at KnobCon a few years ago, is we were talking about mixers, and I really loved his Eurorack stuff. And he basically said to me, what's missing from the market? And I said, we need a standalone desktop performance mixer for electronic music musicians. That is not a DJ mixer, and it's not a desktop studio mixer. It is a performance mixer for electronic musicians. And he said, oh, that's really funny. I've been working on that. We should talk. And that's how our whole relationship started, because he was already working on exactly the thing that I wanted to see. And then we just kind of worked together on what we would like it to do and how. And he would be like, what do you think about this? And I would say, like, well, what do you think about this? And he's like, I can't, that's not possible, or whatever. We had all these great conversations about it. And then it ended up as this thing. But the idea was everybody's doing these janky workarounds. Like, I was at the time when I wasn't doing modular, I would do like, Digitact into Digatone, into Syntakt, into Octatrack. And then on the other side, I would have this synth into the Octatrack. And then it would be like kind of weird mixing at the individual device level by channel, and it was super convoluted. And then the Octatrack would mix it together to do performance effects. And it was like, yeah, well, you could kind of make it work, but it wasn't really optimal. It wasn't what you really wanted to do. And so this allows you to do exactly that. Mix things properly and then send them to the Octatrack to do all of the cool performance effects or looping or whatever. Or even if you don't have an Octatrack, let's say you have a looper. Let's say you have one of those like Korg, like pedal board type loopers. You could just have one of your output go out to that looper and then back into a channel. And then when you say, you know what, I just want to loop my kick drum, you send that out the looper track, you loop, and then you take it back, and then you bring up the level of the looper track, and you've got your kick drum looping. I want to now send out this other thing. Now I want to send out this other thing. And you can just send out bits of things whenever you want by just assigning it to that path. capturing it with the looper. And the looper doesn't even have to be a pedal. It could be the bento, it could be the black box. You can send it out to there, grab a loop, and then you've got it. And then you can keep using it. So it's like we wanted it to be really flexible, like you said, as kind of like a workaround hub. Like it's the thing that keeps you from having to do all the workarounds without having to be digital, with digital switching and all that kind of stuff. We wanted it to be an analog quality mixer with absolutely phenomenal output quality and level, but have all this flexibility so that you could not have to do all these workarounds. So yeah, I'm totally with you. That was what we were thinking. So yes. Let's see, what would it be? The cheapest setup you would still be comfortable to play a full live set. Always love these. Thanks, man. For me, it's, I mean, cheap, the cheapest. I mean, I don't know. There's the cheapest thing would be, you know, an iPad and your phone that you already have with a couple of, you know, $1.99 plugins that you could then mix with AUM on your iPad that you already have. Or, you know, a laptop and, you know, a $150 MIDI controller. That would be the cheapest setup. But for me, it's not about cheap. For me, it's about what does the things you want to do. Like I want to be able to hands-on manipulate things. And so that for me means multiple things that are knob per function, that aren't necessarily digital, that don't necessarily have menus in them and stuff. So it just kind of, yeah, it depends. I mean, if I was just going to take one piece of my gear, if you told me that I had to do a live set on just one piece of the gear that I have right here, it would either be, well, I mean, it could be any of it. It could be the Bento, the TR-1000, the Toneberg, or the modular, but like those are not all the same price. So like of those ones, the cheapest would be the Bento, because that's of that group, it's the cheapest, but it's also probably the lowest as far as capability goes. So it just kind of depends. You know, I wish there was a good answer to that. I'm sorry, I'm kind of dancing around the answer, but it's not that I'm trying not to give one. I just don't really have one because I don't approach it that way. Like what's the cheapest way? Because again, the cheapest is obvious. The cheapest is whatever you already have. So if you have a phone, go to your phone. Like if you go into my phone right now and you go to my music apps, you'll find things like the Moog, Mini Moog app. And I can use that synth. And then I can connect that synth with a whole bunch of other synths and drum machines in AUM, in another software. And these things are like $10, $5, $3, $20. It kind of depends. And they're super cheap. And you could build out an incredibly powerful setup that you could play on your phone. And you already have a phone. And so then you just do a couple little plugins on your phone, and then you've got something really cheap that you could play a whole show on if you wanted to. It wouldn't be as fun, and it wouldn't be as good of a show for people to watch, because the show would be this. This is what the audience would see, is you doing this, and then every once in a while, and then you do this. That's not fun for the audience, right? So it's not a matter of cheap. That's the cheapest by far. Whatever you have is the cheapest. But then it just comes back to, you know, what's fun. And if you want to do something like Groovebox cheap, and if that's the question, you're looking for a cheap Groovebox, I would say a used Digitact 1 would be great. You've still got kind of all the capabilities that you need, and you can get them super cheap now. There's a lot of other Grooveboxes that are out there. There's a lot of the old Korg, what are they called? The old Korg Grooveboxes. There's like a blue one, a red one, a black one, and whatever, I can't remember. But those ones are great. You can get those relatively inexpensive as well. So yeah, there's inexpensive ways to go for sure. There's a lot of gear that, you know, whenever the newest thing comes out, the thing that it replaced in their line. If a Mark II comes out, the Mark I is always less expensive, and it's no less functional than it was the day before the new one came out. Like, it's not like the new one comes out and all of a sudden the old one does less than it used to. It just does less than the expensive one. So those become a really great value. So Digitact 1, Digitone 1. Digitone 1 I'm not a huge fan of because it's so limited in the number of tracks for like if you wanted to play a whole set. So that's why I would say Digitact 1. But then Octatrack 1, Analog Rhythm Mark 1. Analog Rhythm Mark 1 is one of the best values out there because it does basically everything the Mark II does, and it's way less expensive. So that's another great one. There's other kind of all-in-one boxes that you can get pretty cheap, like an MPC One, or like the Machina Plus is really cheap now for some reason. Maybe it's because they're not going to make them anymore, or I don't know, whatever that reason is. But yeah, MPCs, I would say look at any of those, but find, they're all capable. They can all do it. But for me, for my gear, I don't know. I like playing the Electron boxes. I think they're fun. So I think if I was to choose one of these, it would probably be the Toneberg of the ones that I have right here on the desk, just because for me the Electron box is really fun to play. So there's that. It's still not as interesting for the crowd, but it's much more fun for me than my phone, right? So I guess it goes back to that. Sorry, I don't know if that answered it, but anyway. Let's see what else. Totally mind-blowing. I don't know what that was for, but sure. Rad. Let's see. Literally been dreaming of a mixer like this. Yeah, I mean, we were too, and nobody else made it, so somebody had to. So fortunately, the smart people at BoardBrain did. I like the mixer too. AUM is crazy good. I totally agree. An iPad with the Oxy drop and AUM could be pretty amazing. Sure. Yeah, it could, but I will say, like, that question was cheap. So maybe you already have the iPad and you only need a few things. But then if you get $1,000 sequencer and $1,000 MIDI controller, you've spent $2,000. So why don't you spend $2,000 and get a really functional machine? So it's like, yes, you could. And you would have a lot of flexibility with the iPad and AUM for sure, with being able to change things out. But in that case, if I was going to spend $2,000, I would get a MacBook and I would just play live with Ableton, because then you have all of the capability to do all of the things, right? With really amazing sound quality. So yeah, but again, it just comes down to what you like, what's fun for you to play with. It is not super cheap, you're right. Can Bento save various drum programs or kits? Yes. Yes. So the Bento is kind of set up like the Toneberg in that it has engines per track. So you have 8 tracks, but each track can get an engine loaded on it. And 2 of the engines, the ones that I use the most, are one-shot engines and looper engines. The one-shot engine is basically a black box. So it gives you 16 one-shot slots that can be sequenced externally or internally. So you've got a sequencer inside, which is pretty basic, and that's why I'm using the Oxy One. So you use an external sequencer like the Oxy One to sequence all those one shots. You've got 16 in one track. You could actually load up 8 one-shot tracks, and so you've got 128. Is that right? 128? I think so. Yeah. One shots that you can sequence from anything. So yes, you could do that all at once, or you could switch from one to the other. You can build kits that you can load as a one-shot track. So let's say you took 16 slots and you put in a bunch of like 909 shots that you like into that. You can save that as your personal 909 kit. And then when you open up a new track, it asks you what you want to load on that track. And just like with Ableton, when you're loading things on a track, you can say, I want to load this preset, or I want to load this engine. And so I can say one-shot engine, or I can just say drum kit that is already a one-shot engine with all of the samples saved into it and parameters and all of that stuff. So yeah, so you can load those in by individual track. And with 128 slots, you don't really need to change patterns, although you could, but you've just got so much to deal with. And the way I'm going to be using this is one channel is going to be a drum machine. So it's going to have one-shot samples controlled with the drop, sequenced from the Oxy. And then all the other channels I'm going to use for other things. So I'm going to have one channel that's a looper channel, and I won't use as a looper because I don't perform that way, but a looper track, you can load loops into it and launch them like clips, and they'll repeat. And they're time stretched, and you have a bunch of parameters that you can control over them. So each looper track has 16 slots, just like a one-shot track. So you basically have I have my drum machine, and then I have 7 times 16 slots of loops. So I'm going to make each one of those banks of 16 something different. So these will be percussion loops, these will be vocal loops, these will be sub-bass loops, these will be atmospheric loops, these will be field recordings, these whatever, random things that I don't do with other parts of my live setup, so that I can do those, I can access them with loops whenever I want. And so because there's so many slots, I can go into, let's say, track 3 is my field recordings of all kinds of different things. Because it's multiple, it's 16 slots, I could have 16 field recordings all playing at the same time if I want to. Or I can go in and just play 2 at the same time, or 1, or whatever. So the amount of flexibility that you have of slots in this is nuts. Like, it's really crazy. The only thing I've seen that does more than this would be like an MPC or like a Force or a Push 3. And this is way cheaper than those and way smaller and battery powered. And the time stretch algorithm is really good. So it's kind of like, it does what I need. That's why I'm using it. And going back to that thing, like, yes, they sent me the bento, and I really appreciate that they sent me the bento. But at the same time, if they would have sent it to me and I didn't like it, there's plenty of gear that I've gotten sent for free that you've never seen on this channel. Because if I don't use it, it doesn't show up here. Like, the only stuff that's here is the stuff that I use. So yeah, that's why I'm using it, because it does exactly what I want it to do. So anyway, let's see. Imagine I'm really happy with iPad circuit tracks and a few Rolands. Yeah, that's amazing. That's a great setup. Yeah, for sure. And again, you say like to go to the essence. Well, again, for me, the essence isn't dollar based. It's not a monetary thing. For me, if I wanted to go to the essence, it would be a stripped back, very functional modular rig that would probably cost between $5,000 and $10,000. So it's not about cheap. And that's kind of the essence of, I want to make the sounds from scratch. And I want to do everything using control voltage and whatever. That for me is the essence. Or like for drums, going back to the essence would be a vintage 909, which costs, $5,000 to $7,000 to $8,000. And it has a limited number of tracks and a limited number of sounds, but it's kind of the essence. So for me, the essence isn't about price. It can be. You can have inexpensive things that are super, tight, functional, synths like the Swarm, or like the Moog Minotaur. Great bang for the buck for a synth. It's very functional. It does what it's supposed to do, right? So yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. Let's see where we at here. Had the tone work in the Digiton 2, trying to figure out if I can justify the Digiton 2 financially. I have FM elsewhere in my setup, Push 3, Summit, etc. But FM drums, yeah, I mean, Digiton 2 is an amazing synth. And the one I was not a big fan of, the 2 I love. It's one of my favorite synths. So if you want FM synthesis that's easy to do, that sounds phenomenal, the thing with the Digiton 2 that I think is underrated, like that people don't talk about enough, is the track layering. So you can have one sequence control multiple tracks. So you basically have multiple voices of polyphony per track that can all be controlled at the same time by one sequence. And then you can go in and individually modify parameters of individual steps and individual things within each one of those layers. So the way that you can layer sounds in the Digitone 2, I don't know anything that does that at that level. So it's pretty amazing. Now, the other ones you listed there too, Peak, amazing, or Summit, which is obviously Peak, like those are both amazing. Push 3 does all the things. So if you're going to do Push 3, you don't really need anything else. You kind of have all the stuff. But what you gain with something like the Digitone is you gain the hands-on side of it. You know, I'm a nerd for clicky buttons. I like clicky buttons. So I like the Electron boxes and I like the TR-1000. But again, like I said at the beginning, you have functionality, you have fun for you, and you have like entertainment value for the audience. What's fun for them to see. And for me, those go in this layer. Number one most important thing for me is it fun for me to play? Do I really enjoy playing it? That's the most important thing. Then the other two are kind of neck and neck, but secondary, functionality and audience. And there's always kind of a balance in those things. But for me, the most important thing is it fun for me to play? And if it is, I'll use it. And if it's not, then I won't. No matter how functional it is, I won't use it if it's not fun. So, let's see. Oh my God, so Bento Community. Yeah, I mean, Bento, when it first came out, was a mess. Like the software was a mess and it didn't do what it was supposed to do and it was super clunky and it's still not finished. Like it still has clunky things. It still has weird workflows for some things, but fortunately they're not things that I use a lot. But for what I want to use it for, those things, it does really, really well right now. So yeah, eventually they'll fix the other things, but the other things aren't a deal breaker for me. And so for me, it's not that important to wait for that. So anyway, just tuned in. Hey, what's going on, Quentin? Klangspor is he's going to be. We were talking at the beginning of the stream about the show at the Cluster Festival in Delft in the Netherlands in August 29th. Klangspor is going to be playing that as well, back to back with Paul Ray, which is going to be super cool. I can't wait to see them play. And yeah, thanks for connecting me with those guys. Let's see, well, Bento has 3 stereo outputs. Yes, 3 stereo outputs that with a cable, if you have, I've actually got a bunch of these cables somewhere here. If you have the TRS to dual TR output cables, those 3 stereos can be 6 mono outputs. So using something like the Bento with the Exelon, and then you've also got multiple inputs. I can't remember how many. Let's see. Oh yeah, I've got 3 stereo or dual mono inputs as well. So what you could do, Bento and Exelon SL, you can split those channels, send them each to a separate channel out here. Then you can mix them analog, and that could be your whole live rig with an analog mixer and all that sound capability. You can send out individual drum tracks from the one-shots to go like to your kick and your whatever, or you can send them out in groups to go out to different things because you can assign the outputs to all of those. And then because you have ins and outs, you could also take your effects sends out from this into the Bento, use the internal effects in the Bento and route those back out to the returns here. So I mean, devices like the Bento, the TR-1000, and the Tonewerk are, again, we talk about like capabilities or what they can do. Things that they do that other things don't generally do is they have individual outputs for different things that are assignable. So you can assign individual outputs and then go into a mixer. Okay, here comes another thunderstorm. Individual outputs and then go into your mixer and use those in a different way. So it's one of the reasons why I always love the classic black box from 1010 is because it had multiple outputs. And the blue box, I use the blue box as a multi-track recorder. I go individual outs from this mixer and I patch those into the individual inputs in the blue box, hit record, and I have a multi-track recording directly out from here. So having multiple inputs and outputs is a highly underrated capability. People are too quick to look at like, what does the insides do? And they don't think about the connectivity, like with the Bento. The drop. You don't think about how it connects what can come in, what can come out, and what it does with those signals. So that's where a lot of these pieces of gear are expensive, because they do more things than just kind of like, it's not just a drum machine or just a synth, you know, it's they do other stuff. Let's see. Yes, read the manual of the Bento. The Etone 2 is really fun. Can't wait for the Outbox 8. Yeah, the Outbox 8 is really funny. When the Electron guys, when we first showed the Exelon SL at Buchla & Friends in LA, Christian from Electron came over and saw the SL, and he said, it's funny. And at Electron, in our Slack, in our internal office Slack, everybody's always saying we need to do a mixer. And so while he was standing there, he took a picture of the SL and sent it to his office Slack and said, now we don't need to make a mixer, because now there's a mixer for their boxes. And they actually, from Superbooth, took one of the Exelon SLs back to Sweden. They used it to film a bunch of content for the Outbox and to show how it would be used with an external mixer. And then they sent the SL back to BoardBrain. So you're going to start to see coming out soon, once they're going to be releasing the Outbox, all of the content that they filmed using the Outbox with those devices is using the Exelon SL as the mixer that works perfectly with it. Because it's like, we didn't know that was coming out, and then it just happened to be at the same show, and we were like, that's kind of cool. It's like if they were made to go together. So yeah, that's like a match made in heaven. A single, like if you had Digitact 1, because the Outbox has 8 mono outputs and the Digitact 1 has 8 mono channels. So if you had Digitact 1 and the Outbox coming into the 8 channels of the Exelon, you could do a phenomenal live set, because you've got all this control over each individual channel, and you've got every single thing sampled coming from the Digitact 1 for, you know, in something that would cost you $400 used. So yeah, that's going to be amazing. Let's see. Wondering, how are you connecting Bohm kick and TR-1000 kick in this setup? So I don't use the TR-1000 kick in this setup. I know, sacrilege. The TR-1000 kicks, the 909 kick is an amazing classic sounding kick. I like the modern sound of the Bohm kick, but I have done in a setup where I sequenced both from the TR-1000 by routing the kick output as a CV out instead of audio out, and using that to trigger the Bohm. And then you can send the Bohm back into the TR-1000 audio if you wanted to, or send them both into a channel and mix them, or put them on each on their own channel and mix them audio wise. But that way the sequence is all coming from one spot, to do it from one place. So you could do it many ways if you wanted to layer the two of those things together. But I don't use the TR-1000 kick. As a general rule, I prefer the Bohm kick, but that's just me. But again, like I said, you could do it. It's pretty easy to do, especially with that assignable output. The fact that it doesn't have to be audio and it can be assigned to CV, you just assign that and you use a 1/4 inch to 3.5 millimeter cable, plug it directly into the trigger of the Bohm, and then that sequence on that track becomes your Bohm sequence as well. So then you sequence the two of them together. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Let's see, can't use the rumble of the Bohm when using the kick from the TR-1000. Yes, you can. And again, it's that same thing. If you're sequencing them the same, like from here, you would just, what you would basically do is just turn down the kick itself and just have the groove output. Or you can go into the software and you can split the two outputs to be mono kick and mono groove. And if you do that, then you can put them on different channels. And then you can have the kick from here and the rumble from the groove. So there are definitely ways to do it, 100%. Let's see what else. One of the main things I see with my new device is how many outputs. Yeah, for me, that's important too. Totally agree. Especially now with this mixer. It was less important before I had an outboard mixer, but now that I have a capable outboard mixer, I want to be able to bring things in separately so that I can control them separately. So, I was just gonna say the Outbox is on my radar. For example, yeah. Cool thing about the Outbox, I have to say, as soon as I saw it when they had it at the show, I was like, they just made all of their older machines more valuable again. Because now a Digitakt 1 can have 8 individual outputs, and all of a sudden, that's way more capable than any Groovebox you're going to find at $400, which is what you can get a used Digitakt 1 for. So yeah, it's hair in my mouth. Yeah, it's. I think that was a really smart move on their part to do that, and obviously it makes the new ones more valuable too. So yeah, it's very cool. The other thing that's cool with the Outbox that I didn't get at first until they gave me the explanation, I thought you could assign a channel to a channel, and you can actually assign it by buses, which is really great. So like if you've got a Digitakt 2, so you've got 16 channels and they're stereo, so you've got like 32 individual outputs. What you can do is you can assign, channels 1 through 8 to outputs 1 and 2 stereo. And then you can assign 9 to its own output, and then 10 and 11 each to a mono output. So you can assign them all different ways to go out. You just have 8 combinations of outputs. So it can be 4 stereo buses, or it could be 8 individual mono channels, or it can be a combination of those different things. So it's really cool. The Outbox is really, really neat. And the other thing too that I also didn't realize at the start is that it does MIDI to CV conversion. So you can sequence through the Outbox to go CV out to a modular, which is another super cool use of it as well. So yeah, it does audio and CV. So again, it's a way cooler box than it looked like. When it first came out, I was like, oh, cool, 8 outputs, neat. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. It's like way more than that. It does way more than that. So yeah, it's a super cool device. I'm excited for it. I can't wait to get my hands on one. And again, especially with the Exelon. Like anytime you've got, like, what's great about this is that you can take any of those digital boxes, or even analog ones like the Analog 4 or the Rhythm. You can take those multiple outputs and you can come into an analog mix environment with analog drive, analog compression, mixing, all of that stuff, sidechain, all of that stuff, and then send it out to your output. So you can use analog drive on each channel to warm up those digital signals that come in. And so yeah, it's a crazy good combination. I agree with you. Let's see. I don't understand why more companies don't take advantage of the headphone output. Toneberg can push through both, let you use it as a separate output or a QMix. Yeah, and that's been a thing for, like, with the Octatrack for years. And the Bento does it as well. But that was always the thing with the Octatrack, is that you could create these effect send and returns by going out an output through pedals and then back in, or sorry, going out through the headphone through pedals and back into an input, because you can assign channels to the headphone out only, to like the Q out. And then you would activate the Q, and that would activate the pedal path as a send. So yeah, that was always kind of an Octatrack hack, but that you could also do on other devices as well. But then you've got things like the Bento or like the Black Box, where you can use that headphone out as an actual assignable output. It's just TRS, so it becomes another one. So yes. Let's see, are you recording individual channels in this setup or just recording the stereo out? So I don't have it set up right now, but I can show you. Reach up for other device here. So I use the 1010 Blue Box, and if you look on the back of the Blue Box, let me see if I tilt this so you can see it in the camera. On the back of the Blue Box, you have 6 stereo ins, which can be input as dual monos, and those are all assignable by channel. So like monos can be assigned to channels, or stereos can be assigned as pairs to channels. And then what I do is, let me just take a random pouch cable here. Imagine this was a TRS cable, which it is not. I can go out from every one of these outputs in the Exelon into inputs here, and then I can just set this next to my rig, and when it comes time to play, I just hit record. I can multi-track record my entire performance, so all of these individual outputs multi-track into this, and then when it's done, I just pop out the SD card, which is here on the front, pop out the SD card, load it into my computer, and I actually have I have an Ableton template that I built just for that, which takes the 12 mono tracks, or however I have them routed in the from the SD card. If I highlight them all together and I drag them into my Ableton template, it already assigns them to the tracks that are the names of where I put things in my mixer. And so it's just like super quick. I just drag it in, it's multi-tracked into Ableton, and then I can go in and do whatever I need to do. So yeah, so with that, with the combination of this mixer and the Blue Box, it gives me a really small portable way to multi-track. And what's fun is that, like, my live sets are all improvised, so I don't know what I'm going to play, and it's always nice to kind of capture that. And sometimes I don't want the whole mix. I have my main mix. There's a record out here, and this is actually going. It's a little convoluted, but this is actually going into the Tonewerk right now, so that I can use the Tonewerk as an audio interface to record my main out into Ableton directly into my laptop, and that's what this main output is coming out of. The Tonewerk also has another output that's going into one of my little cameras. So everything that you're hearing from this mixer is going out the record out into the Tonewerk, and then out of the Tonewerk into one of my cameras, so that you can hear my whole rig, that it's acting as my audio interface for the camera as well. So anyway, so I have ways that I can record the main out at the same time as each individual channel out. So if I like the main out and I want to record the whole performance, I can do that. But the individual channel outs, they're all pre-faders. So I basically have this kind of endless supply of samples that I can then chop up in Ableton and use for other things, to make tracks, to reload into the Bento, or reload into the Tonewerk, or reload into my live setup to be able to reuse then again. And so it just gives me a lot of flexibility and capabilities to be able to do a bunch of interesting stuff. So yes, to answer your question, long story short, I can record out, multi-track everything from this live setup, the way it is, the way it's set up here. At least the tracks that are into the mixer. Okay. Which is, again, like we were talking about before, something that you wouldn't normally expect from an analog mixer. Like, you can have a digital mixer or an analog mixer that has a digital converter in it, which makes them way bigger, way heavier, and way more expensive. Then you're doing your digital to audio conversion inside the mixer, and then you can go USB out to some sort of a recorder. So you would then need to have a laptop, a computer, some sort of a multi-track that it was going into, whatever you were going to go into that way, that could go from the USB into that, right? So you would need that even if you had the digital or analog to digital, like for example, a Big 6. That analog mixer that has digital conversion that can then go USB out to your computer. So, but then again, you still need the computer. With this, I can just patch analog straight out to a multi-track recorder, which I couldn't do from a lot of other mixers because they don't have individual outputs that are analog outputs. They may have a way to do analog to digital conversion and then do a digital output, which you then need to convert into a format that you can use. So again, the thought behind this was to be able to do exactly this, to say, I want to record things out while I'm playing live and not have to have a computer on stage, not have to have, not have to build an analog to digital converter into this, making it way more expensive, adding a whole nother layer of weight and size and all that stuff. So that was the idea, was to keep this super portable, but still super flexible, so you could do all that stuff. And again, this doesn't have to be to the Blue Box. Like, that gives me a lot of options. But for example, if you've got something with multiple inputs, like an Octatrack has 4 inputs, I could take 4 tracks from this, plug those into an Octatrack, and record those into the Octatrack. Or I could record it into an MPC, or I could record it into the Bento. The Bento has looper tracks. I can loop that and I can save those loops as samples. So you could do, and the Bento has 6 mono or 3 stereo inputs. So this could be, if you have mono tracks, you can just go into mono tracks. So again, you have a lot of flexibility to connect this to a lot of other stuff, rather than just USB to a computer if it were digital or if it were analog to digital. Okay. So, what else? They could easily squeeze more value out of any groove box if you could send drums out one input and pad synth out another. That's not individual outs. Yeah, I agree. I wish more companies did that. But I have to say, like you said, they could squeeze more value. So what did Electron do? They were smart. They said, instead of adding that functionality to a bunch of new devices that may come out someday, and then having our old devices not be able to do it, let's just make a box that makes that possible in every single device that we've made, or at least the vast majority of the devices that we've made. And so I think it was a very smart move, because the thousands of people out there that have a Digitact 1 now have something new that they can buy without having to sell their Digitact 1 and feel guilty that they have to spend a bunch of extra money. They just have this thing that's not too expensive that makes their Digitact 1 way more valuable now and way more usable. So I think it was really smart what they did. When I saw that, I was like, I was impressed that they did that. Let's see, Akai MPC-1, I think one of the last versions can be set to multiple audio. Yes, that is a plus of the MPC-1 for sure. And I think the MPC Live has some outputs that are different as well. The only problem for me with those is that you have to suffer through that workflow, which is just not a workflow I ever got along with. But yeah, they're capable if you can deal with the workflow. That's the thing. Roland and MPC are the two that, man, the workflow is a challenge for me. Thankfully, when Roland did the TR-1000, they ripped off the workflow pretty much basically from Electron. And so it's, like Electron, you've got your screen with 8 parameters and 8 knobs next to it. And in the TR-1000, you've got your screen with 6 parameters and 6 knobs below it. And they correspond, just like these correspond. So they basically took it one-to-one. Whereas with an MPC, I remember I had an MPC for a short time and I got so frustrated with it. You would have the screen and it had 4 knobs, I think, down the side. And there were some times that the parameters of those 4 knobs were on the screen right next to the knob. And then there were other times that the parameters were across the bottom. And then there were other times where it was just parameters and without any labeling. And so you just had to know what worked. And then I was so used to Electron, where it's like, you go to a thing like this and you've got 8 squares and they correspond to the 8 knobs that are in the exact same position right next to them, right? You've got 8 parameters and it's the exact, so it makes total sense when you look at it. And the MPC one did not. For me, it just did not make sense. And then the Roland one usually was you had one parameter with one knob that could control it. And the only thing you could do was click to the next menu and the next menu and the next menu, and then control with that one knob. Like the MC707 drove me crazy like that, because it's so deep and so capable as a machine, but you only have one input knob. And so you're like, dial, 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 click, and then go to menu, 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 dial, 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 click. Kind of like the Deluge. The Deluge at least has a lot of buttons that they were able to assign to different things. But if you were doing things like with the control knobs, you were super limited. And because it's so functional, that it just, you notice it even more. Like if it only did 3 things and had one knob, you wouldn't worry. But if it does 300 things and you have one knob, then all of a sudden you're just like, what are you doing? Like, how do I do this? So it would get really super frustrating for me. But anyway, what else you got? Any other questions you guys got for me? Anything else you want to see or hear or talk about or vent over? Questions about the meaning of life or whatever? Travel stuff. I mean, that's what we were talking about here is setting up a rig for travel. I wish I could take this whole thing, and if my wife was going with me on every single trip, she could take this as her carry-on, like she was kind enough to do when I went to Superbooth. But if not, that's where my alternative setup comes in, which is minus this, meaning everything else that's here, which all fits into a rolling carry-on bag. So that can all be taken with me. And like I said, again, I mean, just to give you just the example one more time, if like, I'm gonna still keep my kick here for the most part. That's coming out of my modular. That's the kick that I love, right? That's the sound that I love. But all of the other sounds, I was using TR-1000. So if I want rim shot, I can do rim shot here. I can do hi-hats here, or I can do hi-hats here. I can do closed hats here, or I can do closed hats here with a lot of reverb. I can do claps here, or I can do claps here, right? Rim shots here, rim shots here, toms. Or this kind of low subby 808 kick, which I set up as its own unique thing here, which is what I'll use with the BOEM as kind of a primary kick, so that I can have other things. And again, this can be sequenced separately. So like this sequence over here is for this track. So if I just wanted to do like, and again, I have pitch control, I have effects control, I have filter control. So if I wanted to filter this down super low and subby, or if I wanted to pitch it up, and if I wanted to make it rumble, I can add delay and reverb. So again, that's all kind of the control that I wanted to be able to have using this setup that I would normally have with this part of the setup, right? And granted, like I said, it's not one-to-one. A 909 sample is not an analog 909 tom. It is not the same. It doesn't sound the same. You don't have the same, flexibility and control over it as you have 100%. But for a show, it can take a place. Now, if I could take a TR-1000 every time, I would take a TR-1000 every time. And oftentimes actually, I have the possibility of borrowing one for a show, and then I can just bring my kits that I like on a USB, and I can load them into the TR-1000 there, and I can use it there. So if that's possible, like in one of my shows in Croatia, I may be able to use my friend's TR-1000. If I can do that, I'll totally do that, and I would still rather do that. It's more fun to play. It's more interesting to see someone play. You have more control over the stuff, and it sounds better. So yeah, I wish I could. I wish it wasn't so big, but it is. And that's just the reality. Let's see, I have a dual tier keyboard stand with an analog cases, Unison XL case on the bottom with all my Grooveboxes, FX, and keyboard on the second tier. Push 3 takes up half the space of the case. Yeah, and again, those cases, it's funny, when I did my first, this was like years ago, when I did my first live setup, I had a case that was for a DJ controller. It was for it was one of the Pioneer DJ controllers. I can't remember, it was one of the biggest ones. And I was able to build my live set in that case. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Now I have this travel case. I can just take this to a show, slap it down, one plug, and I'm ready to go. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome, as long as I'm playing in my town where I'm driving. And then I realized that if I was going to travel anywhere, I needed to break the kit up so that I could put it into bags and take with me on the plane, because I couldn't take the big case carry-on the plane, and I didn't want to check it. So then it was like, okay, it was one of those things where I kind of learned my lesson by saying, okay, this is amazing. Oh, wait a minute. It's amazing for this scenario and not this other one that I need to do. So then you have to kind of build for your use case again. And, I wish I could take a full huge modular and the TR-1000 and, a bunch of Grooveboxes and all this stuff, but it's just, I can't take it on a plane. So unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way. Oh, by the way, thanks for the tip. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I didn't even notice that. I'm so not used to seeing those that I didn't even notice it was there. So thank you very much. I totally appreciate that. always a plus. Yeah, now that I'm traveling and doing this, any help is much appreciated. Let's see, are you finding any sweet spots with the cosmic debris or any performative insights? I mean, the cosmic debris has a lot of sweet spots. And one of the things that I found is that being able to do kind of splashes with it, kind of like what I was doing in the past with the ghost, is really fun. So if you've got something like, so I'll just do something really, oops, that's not that one, that's this one. So I'll just do something. And then I'll put this. So being able to send stuff out to it. And that's just on the blur one. I actually really like the warp one. This one does some really cool, like, big splashes here. Once you get it onto this kind of infinite setting. So if you put it in that warp, no matter what you send through it, so I'm just sending through that single hi-hat hit. But again, if you move it up to the infinite setting, it starts to loop and it spreads out the delay lines. And so if you were doing like a, so if you were just kind of jamming along doing something like this, and you wanted to do some sort of a breakdown, you can high pass to take your kick out, and then set everything on that infinite. And when you bring it back, it fades back out again. So there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do with the cosmic debris, and a big part of it is kind of figuring out these kind of moves, like what does what if you do it like short, or if you do it long, or if you hold it here and you let it build and then you kill it, or whatever. So there's like, it's I think my favorite thing about the cosmic debris, I mean, of course it sounds amazing, but that's not even for me the best part. For me, the best part is that it's so performative, and there's so many, like, I'm constantly finding new moves of things that you can do, combinations of it, like sending something on a send while you do a thing with things in a certain position does something different. And yeah, it's very cool. But that big swell that I just did is something that I do a lot. If you go back and watch the video that I posted, the 360 video of the prediction cycle show we did in Berlin, you'll hear that a lot, because I had just gotten the cosmic debris, and it was one of those things where I like found that and I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. And so there's these times where I would break down all the drums and I would do these kind of like big swirling swells, and while everything else was going on, and then kind of kill that and drop back into kick drums, and it sounds amazing. So it's like a tension and release machine, and not just an effect. So I love it. I think it's really, really, really a cool module. Very cool. Hell yeah. I think so too. But yeah, that's my thing with the cosmic debris. I think that the best thing performatively about it is that it is very performative. It's amazing. Let's see, been trying out IntelliGel swells and still trying to find the drama I desire. Yeah, well, cosmic debris gives it to you in one knob, which is cool. That's that thing, is that center knob in the cosmic debris. It kind of goes, you're adding more and more and more and more, and then you get to the infinite part, and then it just starts looping back on itself. And so that's where you get those big swells, and it just kind of, it'll go out of control pretty quick. Like, you've got to have your eye on it, but like as it starts to build, then you can take it down, and it does this really cool decay where it all kind of fades back out again. And each one of the delay lines fades out kind of at a different rate, depending on how you have the spread. So it's really cool. It's very performative and very fun. I think that's been my favorite part about it. But as I said earlier, though, it's not going to be in my travel rig this time. I'm going to have the Eventide H90 is going to be my 2 effect sends from the mixer are going to be the 2 sides of the H90. It has dual stereo signal paths, and so I can do the 2 in 1 pedal, and that gives me the ability to move things around a lot. Using the kill function, it depends. Like for example, like that thing that I was just doing. So like you can do 2 different things, right? If you've got this. And then if I kill the filter but let this fade out, it does this. Which is one cool kind of smooth transition way to do it. Or if I did it this way, and I really wanted to be dramatic, I could kill the filter and the effect at the same time. Right? So it gives you, because of the performative aspect of the effect and the fact that they gave you a kill switch, it gives you the opportunity to choose. And so then you can be really, you can be flexible and be more creative and artistic in your performance instead of having it's one of the things that I love about the Meta too, is the fact that it has the kill switch, and we also built it into the Exelon, because it's one thing to do a filter sweep and then bring it back down fast and try to do it right at the right moment. And it's another thing entirely to just kill it and have it disappear. And you don't have to worry about the timing or the sweep, and you can be doing other things. And with the cosmic debris, it's very much the same. In some cases, you're gonna want that tail to kind of move across because you're doing something, like going back to this again. So let's say I wanted to bring in, and this is probably going to sound kind of clunky because I didn't set this up, but let's say I wanted to do that filter sweep with the effect, and I wanted to use that filter sweep and that effect moment to reduce down the sound of this synth voice and bring in the sound of another one. I might want that to be smooth, and I might want to cover it up with the effect. So let's say we bring this in. And we let this get really big. And I can have this fade over. So you see how you would use it as an effect to cover a transition. If you wanted to transition between 2 different ideas, that's where it's really nice to have those effects tails that go across one or the other. But if you want it to be a dramatic moment in your performance where you get like this big tension swell and swirl of all this stuff that's going on and going crazy, and then you just kill it all at once and drop back into a kick drum, you can do that by using the kill switch here and the kill switch there at the same time. You kill them both and you drop back down to something that's much more minimal and more dramatic. So it kind of depends on how you want to do it. And it's funny because, like I mentioned, I'm going to be using the H90. One of the cool things with the H90 is that you can use 2 different algorithms at the same time with, the functionality, one on each signal path. But it also has the capability to play 4 algorithms at the same time, meaning that if you have 2 that are playing and you switch your preset to something else, those other two will fade out smooth as the new one fades in, rather than just cutting from one effect to the other. And there's actually a setting in there on like some of the delays, some of the reverbs, and on the looper, where you can set it to infinite, so that you can have one thing infinitely loop a reverb sound. When you switch to a totally other algorithm on that same channel and then use the other algorithm, that reverb sound or that looper or whatever will keep looping while you're using the new functionality of the new effect. And that will keep going infinitely until you switch to a third one. And then it will cut over really quick from 1 to 3. And the second one will continue on smoothly. So it's like, it's a really interesting way that the pedal is set up to do exactly this stuff that we're talking about. So that's one reason why I'm going to switch to that. Again, because it's one pedal, something that's easier to carry for a live set. Okay. What else? Any other questions before we call it a day here? Anything else about the setup that you'd like to see or hear or question or whatever? Could you use the drop to control the H90? 100%. Because the H90 is controllable via MIDI, and the drop has 4 MIDI outputs. And you know, the cool thing with the drop is that I could turn up I could have this button be assigned to the reverb of this channel in the bento. It can go to 8 destinations. So it can go to the reverb in the bento plus 2 different parameters of controls in the H90, and I just turn one thing and it controls all of them at the same time. So yeah, absolutely 100%. You wouldn't even need a set of dedicated H90 controls. If you wanted to add H90 controls into something that you were already doing, you could totally do that. Or with the multiple layers, now that you have 8 layers, you could have one layer that's just H90. And so as you go to that layer, it would pop up in the screen. This is the H90 layer. Now you know you have all your controls that are set up there, and then yeah, you just go from that. So yes, absolutely 100% you could do that. Let's see, that's what I've been thinking about. The UX of the H90 can be a bit confusing. Yeah, it's although the H90 is way better than the H9. That I will tell you. The H9 was not fun. The H90, at least you can get things on the screen and click through them, and you have controls of kind of like what we were just saying with the Electrons and the TR-1000. You've got like 3 parameters and you've got 3 knobs. So it's a lot easier to control. But yeah, I know that interface is not the best. But again, setting it up as if I'm not wrong, I'm pretty sure you can do program changes and stuff like that with the H90. So you could set up the drop to actually, you press a button, it switches to your totally new program, and then your knobs are set up to be the things that control that program. And that would be totally doable. So again, something like the drop, like the E16 or whatever, that has a lot of functionality and different pages that you can do with something that you could then use with the Exelon SL. You've got this kind of ecosystem that your synths then are interchangeable, or your samplers or your drum machines or whatever you're using are kind of interchangeable, but your workflow then is sequencer, controller, and mix environment. And then everything else can be whatever you want it to be. That's why, that's one of the things I really wanted to show today, is that it doesn't have to be a certain setup. I can still have my TR-1000 sounding-ish setup by using the bento with a MIDI controller. It's not the same. I wish I could use my TR-1000, but in a case where I can't, it gives me a secondary option that's flexible and it's travel worthy. So it's possible to get to the gigs that I want to play. And if I can use a TR-1000, cool. Nothing lost. I just brought the bento, which I would have brought anyway for the other loops and stuff like that I can do with it. And again, the bento, like I mentioned, it has all these loop capabilities. And so I have one track right now that I was just messing around with that's just like loop capability. Take this out of there. There we go. I was like, where is that sound effect coming from? Okay. So like right now, this is just the kick, and then I can take the bento, and I've got some loops here. So if I wanted to bring in like an atmosphere loop, bring in some sort of like a texture. Another one. And then if I wanted some sort of like a percussive loop, and another thing that I like to do in loops, because they're not as fun or as easy to do in a hardware setup, is sub basses. So if I wanted to bring in a sub into this, that's not a rumble, but that's actually a sub bass. So everything you're hearing right now is bone kick drum and bento. And then I can start to bring in my one shots that are also in the bento. I forgot I took off my we've got other loop options. So this is all kind of like, again, this is just bone kick drum and bento that you're hearing right now. So then if I wanted to bring in, let's say I wanted to bring in like that same like dubby stab that I had before, because I don't have a lot of loop possibilities set up right now because I wasn't planning to do this. But let's say I wanted to bring that one in during this little breakdown. Oh, this is a different loop. I'll bring this one instead. Now I'll bring in the little kind of dubby stab. So now this is bone, archer's rig, and then everything else is bento. And again, I like the archer's rig because I can go in and I can do things like so you have a lot of control over things like decay and that. But everything you're hearing here is just loops from the bento on half of one loop track. So if you look at the bento, I don't know if you can see, switch views here. Yeah, if you look at the bento right now, if I go to the tracks view, I'm only using 2 tracks out of 8. I still have 6 tracks that are open. And this is what you're getting out of that. Track 1 is all these loops, right? Which again, if I take these back down, so that's with none of the loops. And everything that you're hearing right now is bone, archer's rig, and track 2, which is 8 one-shot samples that are all being controlled here. So if I take out the Archer's rig, everything you're hearing now is boom and a single track of one-shots that are being sequenced from here, controlled from here, right? And then if you just go back to your loop track, then you have the possibility to start to bring in new things again. So you can bring in things, for example, like vocals. If you wanted to do something interesting. So you can bring in vocals, you can bring in, again, if you wanted to have like, this one was like a, kind of like a rave stabby thing. So again, like what I was saying before to the person who asked the question before, you don't need anything. You need like I could do all of this just on the bento. Like I was taking the kick drum from the Bohm because I like it, but if I just loaded in a kick sample in the bento of a kick, like I can sample the Bohm, load it into the bento, and then I could play the whole thing on this thing that's the size of my hand, and that I can carry with me, and that's battery powered, right? So you can do that. If the important thing is the end output music and the kind of ease or basic way that you can put it out, then you can absolutely do it with one thing. And that for me is less fun, but it's possible, totally. Let's see, we'll be at NomCon in Chicago this September. I don't think so. After going last year, it was not my favorite. So I've gone for a few years in a row. It just wasn't what it had been in the past. And so I don't think so. I may, but I don't anticipate that I will. Let's see, still using the Tonework in live setup or any drums from it. I don't, because like right now, I don't have it set up that way because, well, I take that back. It's not that I don't have it set up that way. It's that I don't need to. So like if I was to go right now, let's see here. So if I was to go to Tonework right now and unmute track 1, let's see here. So I still have kicks in here, and if I unmute track 2, and then I bring that up. So I do still have some drums set up on one-shot tracks in there, just because I haven't changed them out yet. I'm not really using them anymore now that I have the bento, because the bento's better at it, and I'll tell you the main reason why. If you saw the stream where I talked about how I was using the sub tracks, I had one that was low and one that was high, because all of the one-shots in a sub track share the same effect sends. So if I wanted to add reverb to my hi-hats, I was also going to have to add reverb to my kicks. So I put my low end on one and my high end on another, just as an easy way to separate out those one shots. Now with the bento on the other side, on the other hand here, mute those again. On the bento, I have in the individual tracks, so I've got my one shots here. So let's take let's take my lovely rim shot. If I double tap on the rim shot, that takes me into that sample slot menu. And what I have on that sample slot is an individual delay send. I have an individual reverb send, or not. I have a high pass filter, low pass filter with resonance control. I have an overdrive, which I will turn this down because the overdrive is one of the things that in this beta firmware is not working well. When you go from 0 to 0.1, the overdrive sounds like this. That volume level increase was from 0 to 0.1. So they have to fix that. But anyway, there's an overdrive per channel. There's panning, individual. There's pitch control, obviously, and there's level control. Now these things that are mapped here on the drop are mapped to the pitch control that's here. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, but it changes the numbers here on the screen. This is my delay send, my reverb send, but they're all from that individual track. And with the Tonewerk, subtracks, so there you've got 8 slots for one shots, but they all share the same delay, reverb, and chorus send, or whatever you set up your effect sends to be. So you can't individually control them. Here on a sub track, which is called a one-shot track, on a one-shot track, you don't have 8 slots, you have 16, and every single slot has its own envelope, its own LFO, its own kind of launch mode, so triggering or whatever. You can reverse individual ones. You've got mono and polyphonic mode. You can set it up for a choke group. And then you've got level, pitch, pan, overdrive, delay send, reverb send, filter, and resonance. And that's every slot. So let's say you had all 8 tracks all set up as one-shot tracks or sub-tracks in the Tonewerk, but they would all be one-shot tracks here. You have, every single one of those tracks has the 16 slots, and each slot has envelope, filter, LFO, pitch, effect send for delay, effect send for reverb, all of that stuff individually per slot in all of those slots per track. So that's why for me, the way I was using the Tonewerk, I don't need to anymore because of the Bento. And I was using the Tonewerk that way because I didn't have the Bento, and the black box, which I had, only had 16 slots, and that was it. And it was a little bit hard to get into them, to get them to do the things you wanted to do. So like if you wanted to control the effects on one, you had to go to a different page and then select that channel again and then control the effects. And with this one, it's all on one page. As soon as I go into that sample slot, I have all my effect sends, overdrive, pan, pitch, level, the envelope, LFO, it's all on one page. So that's the advantage of the bigger screen and the better user interface than what was on the black box. So I can do that. So to answer your question, James, yes, I have those in the Tonewerk, but I'm not really using them anymore. I just have them set up that way. What I do have still in the Tonewerk is, so let's go back to like some little groove thing that we're doing. What I do have in the Tonewerk is I was just messing around with a couple of random channels here earlier. So I have like, individual impacts. adding in those kind of things that, like, where the Tonewerk really shines, and this again, this goes back to that same conversation that we were having earlier, which was about like why I don't like talking about this is better than this or this replaces this or whatever. Things can replace things for individual functions, but that doesn't mean you have to kind of throw out the entire box because it doesn't do everything the best. So the Bento for me is way better at the one-shot tracks and the loop tracks than the Tonewerk. The Tonewerk doesn't time stretch and the Bento does. So those loop tracks aren't even possible in the Tonewerk. And the one-shot tracks are way better in the Bento than they are in the Tonewerk. So for that, it's better. But the Tonewerk, the granular synth engine and the wavetable synth engine are way, way better than the granular engine and the wavetable synth engine in the Bento. So you could use one or the other for one shots, granular, and wavetable, right? You could use either one, but one is better at some and one is better at others. And for the option of time stretching loops, you really can only use the Bento because the Tonewerk doesn't do that yet. I hear a rumor that it will time stretch at some point, but that's the thing. So everything is kind of a trade-off. With the TR-1000, I have one shots, amazing, the control, the sequenceability, the sound shaping. I have loops, I have time stretching, and I have 909 analog engines, 808 analog engines, and all of the ACB from every Roland machine that's ever been made, all in one machine. So this does way more things, but it's gigantic and I can't travel with it. So in that case, it's like, okay, well then sound, synthesis, sound shaping, Tonewerk, maybe Digitone 2, super capable, not too big, great for traveling, all that stuff for synthesis and sound shaping. Granular, wavetable, and then Digitone 2, obviously FM. And then for one shots, drums, samples, Bento, time stretching loops, Bento. And I don't have anything that does analog drum synth or ACB version of drum synth. I actually toyed around with the idea with this smaller setup, instead of bringing the TR-1000, bringing the Bento and getting a Roland Boutique 909, the boutique version of it, because that's the ACB version of all of the 909 engines. So then that kind of would fill in that spot. So it all just kind of depends on what your needs are. If you don't need analog drum synths, then you don't need this. If you don't need the hands-on capability, the output quality of this, you don't need this. It's not a good deal at any price, and it's expensive. So it needs to be what you want. If it is what you need, it's a good deal at the expensive price. So it just comes down to something that you don't need is not a good deal. It depends. It doesn't even matter how cheap it is if you don't need it. And so it's like figuring out what your preferences are, what you want to use, what your, I almost don't want to say needs because it's not really needs, but whatever your needs are, but it's what your wants are. What do you want to perform with? Then you figure out what's the best combination of that. I want time stretched loops. I want hands-on synth engines. I want an analog performative mix environment. I want a central sequencing capability. And I want something that can help me coordinate all of my signals together and act as a control surface. So that's why I have these devices. And if there was something in that I didn't want as part of my setup, I wouldn't need that device. It wouldn't need to be part of that. And so like when I go, I would love to bring the Swarm because I love it, but I don't need that because I have analog engines that are hands-on in my modular. So this won't come with me on this trip, but I'll have the Tonewerk because I don't have wavetable and granular that's that good anywhere else. And I don't have the samples and the loops that are that good anywhere else. So I'll bring the Bento. And I don't have hands-on synths, kick drums, all of that stuff that are as good as my modular. So that's the thing. Everything kind of does the thing that I want it to do. So that's why I chose it. Okay. So what else? Any other questions? Or do we call it a day? You did a good long one today, over 3 hours. That's nice. Last week I got cut short, or no, 2 weeks ago I got cut short because of a thunderstorm. Today the thunderstorms were not that bad. So anyway, anything else? Other questions, comments, feedback, questions, any of that stuff? What I will say is that one last shameless plug. Please come to the shows if you're out and about. I would love to have you at one of the shows, and if you would like to take the course, definitely get signed up. The new one starts tomorrow, so it's a perfect time to sign up. I'm not sure when the next one will be because I have a bunch of gigs coming up, so we'll see when the next one is. But go ahead and sign up for that if you're interested. There's a link in the description of the video, and yeah, Patreon as well. If you bought one of the Exelon SL mixers, remember you get 4 months free of Patreon. So just send me a message with your receipt from your Exelon mixer, and I'll get you the code for the 4 months free of Patreon. And that's a once a week group Zoom call, which is lots of fun. So yeah, well, I hope to see you all on that. Thank you all for hanging out and for yeah, checking out the video, and for all your great questions and your great feedback. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thank you guys.